Okay. Well, I declare open this hearing of the Senate Environment and Communications References Committee's inquiry into 000 service outages. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. These are public proceedings being video streamed live via the Parliament House website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. If there's no objections, the committee authorises media recording and photography of the committee's proceedings in accordance with resolution number 3, the Senate resolution number 3. And I am taking it from my colleagues here that that's authorised. I remind the media that this permission can be revoked at any time, so behave, and the media must follow the direction of Secretariat staff. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to a committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as contempt. It is also contempt to give false or misleading evidence. The committee generally prefers evidence to be given in public, but under the Senate's resolutions, witnesses have the right to be heard in private session. The Senate has resolved that an officer of a department or a Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked to the officer, to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. That resolution, of course, relates to our next witness in relation to ACMA. If a witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground upon which that objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground on which it's claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request the answer be given in camera. Commonwealth officers appearing today are also reminded of the Senate order specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. A copy of the order is available from the Secretariat. I remind all of my fellow senators of our obligations under the Behaviour Code for Australian parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. We have set the date for answers to questions on notice to be due by close of business, Wednesday the 12th of November. Our first witnesses for this inquiry, and I appreciate you being here nice and early and in person for us today, are representatives from Optus. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. Now, I'd like for the Hansard record for you each to give us your full names and the capacity in which you appear. And we'll start with you, Mr Rue, as CEO, and then you can introduce your fellow executives. If we do call up any of your other executives, because we've got a number of them sitting behind, just a reminder that we'll, at that point, get you to read your name onto the Hansard record and then answer the question. So we'll start with you, Mr Rue.
Thank you, Chair. Stephen Rue, the Chief Executive of Optus. To my left, your right, is Michael Venter, who's the Chief Financial Officer, and
we'll have to get him to read his own name.
I'm sorry, yeah. I thought you wanted me to.
That's right.
So to my left is Michael Venter.
Yeah.
Good morning, Senators. Michael Venter, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Optus.
Thank you.
To my right is John Arthur.
Good morning, Senators. My name is John Arthur. I am the Chairman of Optus.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Paul O'Sullivan. I'm a former CEO of Optus and a former Chairman of Optus.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Now, you've got an opening statement for us, Mr Rube. We've just been, I think all my fellow senators have a written copy of it here. But over to you, and then we'll get to some questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Senators. Firstly, let me say on behalf of Optus, the Board, the Executive team and the thousands of people across Australia who work at Optus, what happened on the 18th of September is unacceptable. As the CEO, I'm accountable for Optus's failings, and I'm deeply sorry. We are all deeply sorry. The tragic events the tragic deaths of people during this outage will stay with us as individuals and as a company as we investigate the incident and build on our response while progressing a sweeping transformation of Optus. I joined this company a year ago because I know it is important for Australia that Optus succeeds. When I arrived, Optus was implementing learnings from the 2022 cyber attack and the 2023 national outage. But beyond that, with the support of the board, I also instigated a company-wide transformation focused on process improvements, clear accountabilities, and capability uplift of both people and systems, all supported by a long-term strategic plan. The kind of improvement Optus needs takes time, and I regret our reforms were not embedded earlier to prevent the events of September 18. No telecommunications company can ever promise to stop all outages or disruptions. Indeed, we have had outages since September 18. Telcos must make sure their own networks are reliable. That's on each of us. But we must also ensure that backup systems like CampOn, which is a critical mobile network function that allows a mobile phone to connect to the 000 emergency call service using another carrier's network when the user's own network is unavailable, also works for Australians. That's on all of us as an industry, including telcos, the device manufacturers, the industry, the regulator, and government. The outage on September 18 was not a complex system failure, but it was a unique circumstance where 000 was down while other calls continued normally. The initial mistake, a human error, occurred when the wrong process plan was selected for a routine firewall upgrade. The selected plan did not divert traffic before locking equipment inside the exchange that routes 000 calls. As our submission outlines in detail, this error was not detected because control steps were not followed and alarms were not acted on at the time. The scenario where 000 was down but other calls were continuing also had an impact on existing systems and processes for detecting the outage while in progress, on responding to customer calls alerting us to the outage, on understanding the extent of the outage, and on assessing customer data for welfare checks. This is an explanation, not an excuse. We absolutely should be able to quickly identify a 000 outage. Call centre staff should be trained to escalate any mention of 000, and we should have the capability to assess data and undertake the welfare checks faster. As a result of what happened on 18 September, we made immediate changes to address these issues. Our submission sets out the changes in detail, but in short, every network change now requires explicit confirmation that emergency call routing is functioning both before and after the work is completed. We've implemented 24/7 state-by-state monitoring of 000 call failures and failure rates, volumes and failure rates to enable faster detection of anomalies. Our contact centre procedures have been overhauled, including a mandatory escalation process for any customer reports of 000 issues, ensuring they are immediately referred to our networks team for investigation. We've introduced daily manual 000 test calls in every state and territory, with work underway to implement automated testing in collaboration with industry partners. And a dedicated critical services team has been established within our networks function to provide a direct escalation point for frontline teams and ensure rapid response to incidents affecting calls to 000. These actions are part of our broader commitment to rebuilding trust through meaningful change and action and ensuring Australians can rely on our network when it matters. I fully accept there are aspects to the way events unfolded and how they were communicated over September 18 and 19 that we should have handled better. I assure you we will learn from these. We also recognise the need for more people onshore with the skills to manage complex situations. So we will add around 300 people to our Australian call centres focused on 000 and vulnerable customers, including our specialist care teams helping customers in rural areas, elderly customers, or those with serious medical conditions. In May this year, the board approved management's proposal to take back in-house network activities currently performed by Nokia, both onshore and offshore. At the time, the aim was to transition this work progressively to May 2027, but I've now asked the networks team to accelerate the move. In addition to the onshoring activities in call centres and networks, we are also recruiting 150 people to be part of a new process centre of excellence in Australia to accelerate the transformation and overhaul procedures across the business. There are many very talented and dedicated people at Optus, but all of us need to keep building a culture that seeks to deliver the best customer experience possible, supported by strong process, clear accountabilities, and uplifted capability. This can take time, but remains a key focus for the board and the executive. Understandably, there are questions arising about my position, but I firmly believe that another change of leader at this time is not what Optus needs or what our customers need. The disruption and uncertainty could actually set back the transformation underway and create further risks. We are fully cooperating with ACMA's investigation and, of course, with this inquiry. In parallel, Dr. Kerry Schott AO is leading an independent review into the causes of the outage, the management of 000 calls, and our overall response. Her review is progressing and will be completed in the weeks ahead. We will share a copy of the report with the committee to assist with this inquiry. To support your questioning today, Optus has also provided a detailed submission which includes a comprehensive timeline of events for the outage. So I thank the committee for the opportunity to appear and once again apologise to all those who called for help on September 18 but could not get through. Australians call 000 at the most distressing time in their lives. They absolutely deserve to know their calls will be answered. Thank you, and we look forward to your questions, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Rue, could I please ask, when did Optus first become aware that people had died?
We became, it's set out exactly in our timeline, Senator, and at the back of our submission. But it was on the evening of the 18th of September. I can get you the exact times, Senator.
I'll let you find that. So there was in our submission, so I don't have the page number, 2043 on the 18th. Fatality advised of by customer to Optus contact centre during welfare check, and another one at 2101. And when that information first became available, who in the organisation was notified at 8:48 p.m?
Again, Senator, it was. Sorry, what time did you say, Senator?
Well, you said the first you became aware was yes 8:43 p.m.
Sorry, so Senator, if you
that's when you were first advised through a welfare check for the first fatality.
The individuals in the call centre sent an email on the 19th at 0025.
So, hang on. So at 8:43 p.m. on the Thursday was the first time there was any indication that there had been a fatality, and that information wasn't passed on to anybody else until past midnight.
That's correct, Senator. It's and that's if you. There's no denying that. If you look at my opening statement, I recognise that.
Mm-hmm. Who was made aware? Who made the decision that somebody needed to pass this information on?
The individual who made the welfare check.
And who did they call?
They sent an email, Senator, again, it's in our timeline at 0025. It was sent on to, it was emailed from Optus Community Manager, Contact Centre to Optus VP, Customer Contact Centres, and also sent to Optus VP Operations, Optus Director Security and Public Safety, notifying of fatalities.
Mm-hmm. And was that email seen at that period of the early morning, just past midnight? Was that seen?
No, Senator, was picked up the following morning, unfortunately.
So the email was sent at 25 past midnight to inform management that there had been deaths that had been detected, and nobody saw that until when? 6 a.m. the next morning?
Till sometime the following morning, Senator, yes.
Mm-hmm. And when were you made aware, Mr. Rue?
Again, it's on the timeline, Senator. So if you go to the timeline, you'll see at 8:13 a.m. on the morning of the 19th, that's the Friday morning, I was made aware.
So 12 hours, or 11 and a half hours later?
Yes, Senator, approximately 12 hours later, that's correct.
You became aware. And when you received that information, was that a phone call or was that an email?
It was a phone call.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think when you received that phone call?
What did I think? I thought that there was a lot of information that I needed to immediately get hold of, apart from the obvious human emotion, Senator.
Yes. That information, was that so that you could inform the minister or the regulator, or who was that information being gathered for?
The information was being gathered for the chief executive of the organisation. I was informed of the extent of the outage, and I was informed around the fact that during welfare checks, 2 people had reported an inability to reach 000 and a fatality. So as the chief executive, clearly I then needed to put in place various actions that the company would undertake.
Mm-hmm. When did you first alert the federal government?
Well, the government had been alerted of the outage the day before, so yes. Alerted exactly what, Chair?
When did you call the federal government, the minister, to tell her that people had died?
So we spent that morning. Obviously completing welfare checks, which I'm sure you will come to ask me about, but there were still, unfortunately, welfare checks being undertaken on the morning of the 19th. So what we did that day was ensure that we had as much accurate information as we could gather. At the time we felt we had sufficient accurate information and the welfare checks had been completed. Again, it's on the timeline, but I telephoned Nerida O'Loughlin at the ACMA. Your question around the time...
I understand on your timeline...
Yep, your question, so I'm coming to that. Your question around the timeline of updating the Minister's office. I'm sorry, Senator. I'm trying to apologise. I'm trying to find it here.
So if I look at your timeline,
it's around about 3. It's around about 4 o'clock on the.
4 o'clock.
I think that's correct.
So you find out at 8:15 in the morning that people had died. It took you until 2:30 to call the ACMA chair, the regulator, and then took you until 4 o'clock to speak with the minister, or to inform the minister. What on earth were you doing between 8 a.m. in the morning and 2 p.m. or 2:30?
We were, excuse me, we were completing the welfare checks. We were ensuring that we had information available that was accurate as to the number of missed calls and the, as I said, the completion of the welfare checks. It was important. It was important.
But you weren't doing the welfare checks, Mr. Roux. You had other people doing that. What were you doing? Why hadn't you called the government and told them what was actually going on? I was in a series of meetings with my team to ensure that we had activities such as the network was restored. The welfare checks were being completed. When you have a situation like this, the job is to make sure that you have all the activities in place, including ensuring that we had a list of the people that we needed to discuss with. Surely the job as a telecommunications company that has failed to deliver the most basic service of 000 is to tell the government by which gives you the licence. But of course, it took you hours to do that. You called the CEO of Singtel almost straight away, didn't you? At about 8:52 a.m. So half an hour after you were informed. You called the board. You contacted many of the members of both Singtel and the Optus board. So you made sure the board knew, but you didn't call the minister or the regulator.
Senator, of course I made sure the board knew. So the first call was to Mr. Moon. He's a director of Optus. Under normal circumstances, I would have rung Mr. Arthur straight away. I knew that I always, and while Mr. O'Sullivan was the chair, Mr. O'Sullivan, in these circumstances, Mr. Arthur was on leave overseas, and I knew that was pretty sure, and that was proven when I did ring Mr. Arthur, that I would get a voicemail because it was the middle of the night. So that is why I chose to ring another director, being Mr. Moon, which also provided me the ability for him to tell him in his capacity of CEO of Singtel, so he could talk to his board if he chose to do so. It is normal process in an organisation such as Optus to ensure the board is fully informed of what I know at the time and what activities we are doing to ensure we gather all the facts.
It took you 6 hours to inform the federal government.
It was my judgment, Chair, that it was important that the information provided was accurate.
Well, I put it to you, Mr. Roux. You were too busy putting your ducks in order, telling your board what was going on, contacting your executives, making sure that your company's ducks were in order. Meanwhile, the federal government, the regulator and the minister were left in the dark. The information that your organisation had told them the day before was wrong, and you let it sit there being wrong, devastatingly wrong, deadly wrong, for well over 6 hours. I mean, I just don't think that is good enough.
So, Chair,
and I don't understand. You come in here and you say, my job was to do this, to tell your board before you told the Australian government.
So, Chair, a few things. Firstly, the network issue had been resolved, so that the 000 calls were operating, and there was no danger to the public in the sense that they weren't able to make 000 calls. It was the outage had been informed the day before to accepting the fact that we thought it was fewer missed calls, which I'm sure you'll ask me about, but the judgment I had was that it was best to get the information accurately together and then inform the regulator, the department and the Minister's office.
In my home state in South Australia, families lost loved ones. And you thought it was better to call your board, to let the Singtel board and CEO know, and to get your ducks in order before even telling government authorities. I just don't accept that that is good enough.
So Senator, it is not lost on me. I assure you that people's lives were lost. It was very much a determination of mine that information would be public, and I made that information public personally. But it was important to have the facts so that I had the information I could accurately provide to both the ACMA, the federal government, and the department.
It seems very clear that it was more important to you and to your executive team to make sure your corporate ducks were in order, that your profits would be in order, than people's safety and transparency with government. That is what your timeline shows. Now, what we do about that is another question, but that is what your timeline shows.
So, Senator, I don't accept that characterisation you made there, but there is no doubt. There's no doubt that the timeline shows that there were delays, there were mistakes made. There's no doubt about that, and we have unashamedly, transparently laid that out.
I'm going to give the call now to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you all. Mr Roux, 3 people died. Were these deaths preventable?
Senator, there is no doubt that it was disappointing that on the day of the 18th that errors that were made in upgrading a firewall led to 000 calls not being in all cases being able to be answered for an extended period of time.
More than disappointing, Mr Roux, it was devastating. The consequences of this were devastating.
I agree with that, Senator.
You say in your opening statement, I regret our reforms were not embedded earlier to prevent the events of 18th of September. So it's very clear in your opening statement, Mr Roux, that these deaths could have been prevented if Optus had done what it was meant to have done.
Senator, there were, as I said, there were process errors made, and as you can see that I've talked about the various transformation activities that I have ensured has been undertaking. Unfortunately, they do take a long time, but they are around process and accountabilities.
But Mr Roux, hang on a minute. This is not just about a firewall upgrade and a process failure. Optus never detected the outage, which I'm shocked about.
Yes, Senator, that's correct.
For hours and hours and hours, Optus did not know what was going on.
Yes, so...
You were notified by the South Australian Ambulance Service that the 000 service was out. And that was not till 1:15, many, many hours after the outage first occurred. Why weren't you testing the 000 service during an upgrade to make sure it worked?
So, Senator, again, if you look at our submission...
No, I want a direct... Sorry, Mr Roux, just a direct question on that.
I'm honestly going to give you a direct answer to that. If you look at our submission on pages, which lays out on pages 18 and pages 19, the events of the upgrade of the firewall, you will see that actually alerts were made. And the alerts were misinterpreted, and they were not taken as being errors in the upgrade and calls not going through. So not only were there errors in the way that the network was upgraded, but there was also errors in not following the steps that the alerts were showing. When I say alerts, what it is graphs that shows that calls were not going through. And people did not act upon the information that showed that the 000 calls were not going through.
I mean, that is just unbelievable.
It is.
You have the outage, and then you don't even detect the outage.
The outage was...
And then people were ringing your call centre overseas, and those messages weren't being conveyed back. I mean, it appears there were multiple errors, not just on the firewall upgrade. You weren't testing 000 calls during the firewall upgrade. You didn't detect the outage. You didn't act on calls that were made to your call centre from customers saying, I can't get through to 000. And you found out when the South Australian Ambulance Service rang you. I mean, that's an extraordinary litany of errors and failures.
Yes, Senator. So again, we have not shied away from that in our submission. You can see that we clearly lay out what had occurred. There was, even in that upgrade itself, there were various stages, multiple stages, and I'm sure that, I should say Dr. Schott, of course, is doing her own independent review, and I'm sure her findings will find this as well. But you can see from how we've laid out, again, that's why I point you to pages 18 and 19 of the submission, you can see that there were multiple failures. It not only was the wrong, what's called method of procedure selected, but also the checks that should have been done were not done by individuals. Even then, an alert was shown and that alert was not followed. In terms of the call centres, again...
So on that basis, given the multiple failures that occurred, 3 people died, why should you keep your job? Well,
three people have informed that they were unable to make 000 calls, and as I understand, a fatality occurred. Senator, I've said in my opening statement that the job that I wanted to take at Optus was because I do think Optus is a really important part of the telecommunications sector. You can see...
Hang on. No, sorry, Mr. Rowe, I'm going to cut in there. There were horrendous failures. 3 people died. Could you please address my question?
I am
Why should you keep your job?
I am addressing your question, Senator. The job that I took on was one to ensure that Optus transformed into the business it needed to be because of its import to the telecommunications sector. I always said it would be a multi-year plan to do that, of which we're 1 year into that plan, and it's going to be multi-years. I do believe that another change of leadership would actually set back that plan, which would not be good for customers and also not good for the telecommunications sector.
Mr. Arthur, you are the chairman of Optus. Do you have full confidence in your CEO?
Thank you, Senator. First, let me say that I completely agree with my Chief Executive when he describes the failings that have occurred here as being totally unacceptable. That having been said, Mr. Roux was recruited with the express mandate, with the primary accountability to turn Optus into the sort of company that does not let its customers and the community down in this way. His primary accountability is to fix this company.
But hang on, sorry, Mr. Arthur. I read, and I'll remind you again, in Mr. Roux's opening statement, I regret our reforms were not embedded earlier to prevent the events of September 18. When you are providing a critical life-saving service such as 000, no telecommunications carrier can sit on its hands. And surely that is not good enough, that these reforms were not implemented quickly. I mean, the ACMA determination made in April, the telcos were given 6 months. That's outrageous. On the watch of the minister, that's outrageous. The requirement to notify emergency services in real time, the requirement to do testing, the requirement to submit management plans before you undertook any network upgrade. It's outrageous that they couldn't have been implemented straight away after these were identified 2 years ago in the Bean Review.
Senator, I agree with you. No telco should sit on its hands. These are critical, potentially life-saving issues we're talking about here. So I completely agree with you. However, the work that needs to be done at Optus, as much as I would like it to happen overnight, won't happen overnight. There are fundamental matters, as Mr. Roux has pointed out, about the processes within the company, the accountabilities and, frankly, the risk awareness within the company.
Mr Arthur, because we've got limited time, I'm just going to cut in here. I'm not saying changes should happen overnight, but they should not. You should not sit on your hands for months and months. 2 years after the Bean Review made recommendations, we're talking about a life-saving service. We're talking about a critical service here. And we are astounded that you did not even know there was an outage. I mean, this is basic. This is catastrophic mistakes made by Optus.
Senator, I am agreeing with you. There is an absolute imperative for urgency. What I'm trying to explain to you is that we were not sitting on our hands. We were actively and urgently
But you weren't.
changing the things at Optus.
Your CEO has just said our reforms are not, I regret, our reforms are not embedded earlier to prevent the deaths of the September the 18th.
So, Senator, if I could just say, the controls were actually in place. In fact, the process in this case was a good process. What occurred here was that individuals did not follow the process.
That's a cultural problem within your organisation. And as Mr Arthur has just said, there is risk awareness problem in the company. A risk awareness problem.
Sorry, I'll just finish mine. So we've got the alerts. So it's not just the original firewall upgrade, which was defective.
Yeah.
Then there were the alerts that were not detected.
That's correct.
And what about your call centre? And I appreciate that you are moving some of your offshore operations onshore.
Yeah.
Every single person needs to be in this country.
So
No one should be offshore. Do you know how frustrating it is to ring any large company and be put into an overseas call centre?
So, Senator, I don't resolve from the errors in the call centre. In fact, I talked about those errors on the second or third day after the outage in a public press conference. So I do not resolve from them. You are correct to point out, and as we point out in our submission, that there were indications made to people in an overseas call centre, as you point out, that there was some failings with 000. This is not, as I said in my opening statement, this is not a defence, it's an explanation. It is an explanation. And the explanation is that the normal calls, or when I say normal calls, non-000 calls, were operating. This was a unique situation whereby the call centre people believed the network was not failing. But they should have escalated those calls. In what I've said in my statement is that we will take back calls that relate to 000, calls that relate to vulnerable customers, as I said, elderly customers, for example, and ensure that they are dealt with onshore in Australia, and we're in the process of doing exactly that.
Well, I would put to you that that's not good enough, Mr Roux. All of your customer service personnel should be onshore. Wow. No person, doesn't matter whether they're old, young, they can be a teenager, everyone is entitled to the same support.
Well,
and surely this is a wake-up call for Optus, that you've got to do absolutely everything to deliver the best possible service to ensure this never happens again.
Senator, I completely agree with that sentiment. We do have to do everything to ensure we have the best possible service. It is my judgment that having those calls on shore will be very important for 000, for vulnerable customers and so on, and having those onshore, and that's why we're actually in the process of doing that now.
I'll hand over to the chair, who needs to chair the call round.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. I'm going to go to Senator Gosh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here today.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr Rue, you said in one of your earlier answers that you informed the federal government of the outage on Thursday, 18 September.
Yes.
What did you tell the government on that date?
Yeah. So I don't have the specific words, but in general terms, we were aware that there had been an outage that impacted 000 calls, and we informed, as was required by regulation, we informed what's known as the ECP, or the people who take the 000 calls operated by Telstra and others, and an obligation to inform the ACMA. We did both of those. They then also ensured the Minister's office was aware that we had an outage for an extended period of time to 000.
I am going to need some more detail on that. What did you tell the Minister's office?
At the time, we believed that it had impacted 10 missed calls, and that was an incorrect estimate that was made at the time, and that information was passed on.
Can we just check the form of that communication?
Oh, certainly. How did you communicate that to the government, Mr. Director? Thank you.
Could I ask one of my colleagues to provide the detail?
Yes.
Could I ask Felicity to? And she can take you through chapter and verse of all the details. If you could
Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Senators. My name is Felicity Ross. I'm the Chief Corporate Affairs and Marketing Officer at Optus. So on the day of the Thursday, the 18th, within an hour of the team being notified that we had this outage and the mandatory notifications commencing, we did contact the Minister's office, firstly by phone call, and then we confirmed that there was an outage, that 000 had been impacted in WA and SA, and that we would send an email when that was resolved. At 2:45, we sent an email.
Sorry, was that call answered? I'm assuming when you say a call that the call was answered. Was the call answered?
There might have been
I think in your documentation it says not.
Let's go to the documentation, Senator. I'm looking at
So what time on the 18th are we looking at?
I'm looking at 2:19, I believe, or let's have a look.
So on the 18th of September 2025...
Sorry, Senator Smith.
Yep.
So, no, but I think this is an important point.
I don't disagree with you, but
Just get
There you go, it's 2:34.
Yep.
2:34, call from senior advisor in my team. Is a call back, I presume. I can't see the detail beforehand. Oh yes, 2:31, call was made, not answered. And then at 2:34...
And no message left, it says in your documentation as well.
I do not believe a voicemail was left.
It says
no.
here, and no message was left.
That's right. I
in
think...
your submission. Yep.
I believe that is because the person in my team was writing an email. So when the senior advisor responded from the Minister for Communications, we informed that there was an issue with 000 in WA and SA, and that Optus would send through an email when resolved.
Okay. And that was at 2:34.
Thank you, Chair. So that communication indicated 10 calls may have been impacted from your timeline.
Yes.
And that in none of those communications it was communicated that there had been fatalities as a result of the outage.
That's correct, Senator, yes.
Nor in the call.
No.
Okay. So, Mr. Roux, can I go back to your answer before? And as I understood it, you had said this, but let me just clarify it.
Sure.
You had said the government was notified. Now, when you say the government was notified, given the content of that notification that we've just heard, that notification was inaccurate and potentially misleading?
Well, it sadly at that time it certainly was inaccurate, in the sense that there were a lot more missed calls, and you asked, was there any information about fatalities? Well, clearly that came through later on in the day for us. So it wasn't. I wouldn't categorise it as misleading in the sense that it was information as we knew it at the time.
Go ahead.
Well, given the extent of what I think it's fair to say is an understatement of the information, and given the information that existed in different parts of the organisation at that point in time, would you accept that characterisation, if I can borrow the Chair's words, that that was grossly inaccurate?
At that time, on the 18th, Senator, at whatever the time was, 2:34, we had just stopped the network issue had just been resolved. 000 calls were working again. We were not aware of the extent of the number of missed calls, nor the extent of welfare checks that would need to be done. So the information we provided at that time as I said earlier, to the ACMA and to the ECP was the fact there had been an outage. The information we then provided to Department and to Government was as we knew it at the time. Sadly, it turned out to be different. I accept that. But at that time, that's what we were aware of.
But that's the point, isn't it? That you told me that you didn't have to call the government as soon as you found out people had died on the Friday morning, more interested in having your crisis meetings with your board and your executives because you'd already informed them. Senator Gosch's point is you hadn't. You hadn't informed them at all.
We had the obligation we had on the 18th was to inform the ACMA and as I said, the ECP of the fact that there had been a network outage, and we did that. Because we did that, we also made sure, which is not required by regulation, but we made sure that we informed the department and the minister's office as well.
Surely you have an obligation to inform the regulator and the government as soon as you know that the information you had previously given them was wrong, grossly inadequate, wrong, so wrong that it actually has led and is linked to people's death. That's the point here. You can't just say, we sent them an email, we got it wrong back then, but then it was done. Tick, flick, whatever. I mean, you had an obligation to inform them as soon as you knew what the real information was, and you failed to do that.
I can only repeat, Senator, what I said earlier. It was my judgment that it was important to provide the authorities on the 19th of accurate information given the events that had unfolded, and we had not completed. The network was operating. We had not completed our welfare checks. I wanted to ensure that we had that information, and that was what, as I said, that was the judgment that I made. And once we had that information, we then provided it.
I put it to you, terrible judgment.
But surely you're in damage control.
Senator Gosch.
I appreciate that providing accurate information is always important, but these things don't exist in a binary. So there is a developing understanding at Optus during that period, from when you have contacted the Minister's office and sent those emails, and when you accurately provide the information about what has actually happened. Can I ask, from a process point of view, why didn't you think it was important to update along the way, even with relevant qualifications as to developing information?
Well, if you recall an answer to, I think it was Senator Hanson-Young, it might have been Senator Henderson, but who asked when did I first find out? It was Senator Hanson. He was the chair, and that was not until the following day. And the following day was when we were aware of the events that had unfolded, and the information was fast coming to light. But it was fast coming to light, as they do in these sort of circumstances, unfortunately. So again, I'm sorry, Senator Gosh, I'm just repeating myself, but I felt it was important to ensure that we were not providing inaccurate information. We were providing accurate, complete information. And once the welfare checks had been concluded, we commenced that process of providing that accurate information as we knew it.
Can I clarify something? In your timeline on the 20th of September at 11:23 a.m, you said that you called the Minister. Is that right?
On the Saturday morning?
Yes.
I believe she called me, but I did have a conversation with Minister Wells on the 20th, yes.
Okay, well, I've got your timeline in front of you. In front of me, sorry, and that's 20 September 2025, 11:23. Optus CEO calls Minister for Communications.
I'm sorry, Senator. I wish I'd seen that last night. I think she called me, but regardless, we had a conversation on that day.
Okay. I'd like to change tack slightly here to ask about the role of Nokia and Ericsson in the Optus network and the functions or services they deliver.
Yeah. So it's a combination, Senator. So the both Nokia and Ericsson provide equipment to Optus in our network. Our network is roughly divided, not quite, but roughly divided 50-50 between Ericsson equipment, radio equipment, and Nokia equipment. They then, each of those providers then provide various services as well. For example, things like network provisioning or core network services. So the managed services they provide to help operate that network as well. Specifically, though, the services that Nokia provide to us, which I said in my opening statement, we had decided back in May to transition back to Optus. Are services around network operating centres, so things like alerts, changes, and so on. And so many of the events that the process steps I was talking about earlier, some of those were Optus personnel, some of those were Nokia personnel.
It sounds like you would accept that Australians might find it difficult to trust critical emergency call systems, their safety and their reliability, particularly in the situations of emergency when incident response is essential, when those are partly or wholly outsourced overseas. Would you accept that?
I think I wouldn't quite take that categorisation. I think where you have clear controls, multiple checkpoints, and that's what we attempted to show in our submission, is that there were multiple points of checking. Those process steps should be followed, those controls should be followed, including the alerting that we were talking about earlier. But it was my judgment, and the judgment of our Chief Technology Officer too, that it would be it will be a good thing for Optus to set up its own network operating centre in Australia with Optus personnel, and we were in the process of doing that, whereby by having people closer together that would help with process flow. I wouldn't categorise it. Many telecommunication operators, Senator, use outsourcing, sometimes onshore, and some of the NOCI work is onshore, by the way, I should say. But they use, many telecommunication operators use that, Senator. But it was my judgment, and supported by the board actually as well, and Mr. Baird's judgment, that having our own network operating centre in Australia would be a better way to operate our network, and we were in the process of doing that, and as I said in my opening statement, we're now accelerating that.
Thank you. I'd like to go to page 12 in your submission.
Yep.
And it's paragraph 3, though the paragraphs aren't numbered. In situations where calls to local emergency services are impacted, but this impact does not meet the threshold for a significant local outage or major outage notification, Optus has implemented a voluntary manual process to ensure swift email notification and accurate information is provided to external stakeholders, the ACMA and the department, the emergency call person and the relevant emergency service organisations. What do you understand the word swift means in that paragraph in relation to the informing of external stakeholders?
Well, I think you can see from our timeline, Senator, that the time between us...
I'll let you give that answer as well, but just in terms of...
Swift means
what
quick.
does swift mean?
Quick. So I think you'll see in our timeline that was the case, that when we were, and again this is on the 18th, when we were aware of the outage, that we quickly informed the again the ACMA and the ECP.
You weren't so swift to inform them that you had it wrong, though, were you?
Again, Senator, informing the ACMA and others that there had been a network outage had been done. The network outage had been resolved, was informed. Once again, on the 19th, it was important to have accurate information. This was not about informing authorities that there had been a network outage. That had been informed. What the 19th was about was informing the number of calls that had failed to be able to do a 000 call, and the information we had been provided as well during our welfare checks.
Surely you had an obligation to correct the information as soon as you knew that what you had told the authorities was wrong. You knew, your organisation knew on the Thursday night that the information that you had given the regulator was wrong. You knew at 8:30 the next morning that the information you had given ACMA was wrong. You knew at 10 o'clock, you knew at 11, you knew at midday. It took you 24 hours almost to correct the record.
Well,
it doesn't matter how much you spin this, Mr. Roux, you left a false understanding and false information in the hands of the regulators for almost 24 hours.
Once again, Senator, the welfare checks when they were completed, which I think you'll see on the timeline on the 19th. Forgive me, sorry. The welfare checks, you'll see at 2 o'clock, were completed. At that point in time, I was able to determine what I believed was the information that had been completed from the welfare checks. And when that was done, it was not long after that I informed the chair of the ACMA as to what we had learned through those welfare checks.
Senator Vaughan.
So I want to take you back to one of the answers that you gave to Senator Hanson-Young earlier around the reason that you informed members of your board as a matter of priority. Your answer was you felt it was your obligation to do so. Put that to one side for one moment. Can I ask, from your perspective, what did you hope to achieve in practical terms by informing your board?
Well, it's an obligation of the chief. It's an obligation of the chief executive of an organisation to inform the board immediately of events that occurs, so that they can perform their duties as directors in terms of governance and oversight and management. It's an obligation of the chief executive to do that, and that is why I went through the process of ensuring, again, I would normally have rung Mr. Arthur immediately, but I was aware he was overseas, and I was right. I got a voicemail, and I didn't personally speak to him for several hours after that. I then informed, so that's why I chose to ring another director of mine, Mr. Moon, and then I proceeded to text the remaining members of my board to inform them. It is an obligation of the chief executive to do that.
Were you in contact with your board after you initially informed them of the outage? Were you having ongoing conversations?
We had various director meetings during the day, which again is on the timeline.
Okay, so one of the answers you gave earlier was that you were concerned to ensure that accurate information was provided when providing it to external stakeholders. Why couldn't you provide, with relevant qualifications, the information that you were providing to your board members to the regulator and the government on a similarly ongoing basis?
Because the board member's role is to govern the organisation and is to ensure that management is performing its duties in the board's judgment. So it was important for the board to be aware of the activities that we were taking place to gather accurate information. And therefore, Senator, they were part, if you will, of the process of ensuring we had accurate information. And once again, when I was satisfied we had the accurate information with the welfare checks done, we then informed the relevant authorities. Again, the network at this time was operating. There was no danger to people trying to ring 000. It was important to inform authorities, therefore, when I had accurate information. The board is part of assisting management in getting that information together.
So hold on.
What was Mr. Arthur doing then to assist?
Yes, that's a good question, Chair.
I'm sorry. Your staff were busy doing welfare checks. What was Mr. Arthur doing? Mr. Arthur, what did you do when you received this text message?
Senator, the board's responsibility is, as the Chief Executive has outlined, it is to satisfy itself that management is doing everything it should be doing in response to what was undoubtedly an horrendous crisis.
So were you satisfied that management had fulfilled its obligations in informing the authorities, the regulator and the government, given the information they had already provided was wrong and they knew it was wrong? Was that satisfactory?
Senator, the board met at I believe 3 p.m. on the 19th, which was 7 a.m. where I was, to discuss what had happened, what we had done in response, and critically importantly, how we and when we were going to tell the Australian people about what had happened. That was, as I said, at 3 p.m. on the 19th. That meeting ran for, if I remember correctly, 35 or 40 minutes. At 5:45, I believe it was, Mr. Roux stood up at a press conference and told Australia what had happened.
So I will have to share the call.
Yes,
I appreciate that. May I just have one more question,
Yes.
and it's a relatively discreet one. Thank you, Chair. What was the exact amount of time that elapsed between Optus discovering or being informed about the existence of at least one fatality as a result of this outage, and that information being provided to any party external to Optus?
A significant period of time, Senator. Without doing my mass in my head, but as I responded to the chair earlier, when the first call came in, when the first welfare check, the person doing the welfare check was informed that there had been a fatality. That was on the Thursday evening. And
Ms. Ross, are you able to assist with that question?
I think it's on the timeline when the first account was made through the contact centre, I believe, Senator. But it's as the CEO said, it's a significant amount of time.
Well, I asked for the exact amount. I'm happy to take a ballpark in the absence of that.
So, Senator, the first fatality, it's on the timeline we provide in the submission. The first fatality was fatality advised by customer to Optus Contact Centre during welfare check was at 20:43 on the Thursday evening. And I think your question was, when did I call the chair of the ACMA? And that was on the 19th at 14:36. So it is a period of I think it's 18 hours, not quite, it's almost 18 hours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for your participation. When did the Singtel chair become aware that there had been a fatality in Australia?
I don't know.
Mr. Arthur?
Senator, I can't answer that question other than to say that the Chief Executive rang Mr. Yuan at what time? It was around 9 a.m. on the 19th. And that call was made in two capacities, as the Chief Executive described. One of the capacities was to let Mr. Yuan know as Chief Executive of Singtel so that he could get processes underway there as needs be. One of those processes undoubtedly would have been for him to call the chairman of Singtel.
So if you could take that on notice, when did the chairman of Singtel become aware and who communicated that to him?
We certainly can.
Because I draw that to your attention because the 2025 Singtel annual report at page 61 makes the following statement, and you'll be aware of it as a member of the Risk Committee. The group has put in place a board escalation process where major incidents and violations, including major material operational loss events and potential breaches of laws and regulations by the company and or its key officers, are required to be reported by management and or IA to the board immediately to facilitate the board's oversight of crisis management and adequacy and effectiveness of follow-up actions taken. And of course, just for full completeness, Singtel did make a statement to the Singaporean Stock Exchange later that day prior to the media conference that was held on late Friday afternoon, I think. I think that's correct.
They're matters for Singtel, Senator, so I don't know the answers to those questions, but I don't think...
I'm directing mine at Mr Arthur, who's...
I'm sorry, I don't think the Stock Exchange was before
Senator,
the press conference.
I will find out for you. I'm making the supposition that the Chief Executive of Singtel would have called, which of course is notifying the board of Singtel because he's on the board of Singtel. So the board of Singtel then knows that he would have called the chairman, and he probably would have called the chairman of the Risk Committee as well. But I will find out for you when that happened.
Thank you very much. Why were the calls to the call centre in Manila not escalated?
Senator, I wish they were, first saying they should have been. My assumption is that the call centre operators knew the network was operating, and they went through normal calls were operating, and they went through a normal triage process. But I would be surmising what was in the minds of those call centre operators, Senator, but I believe that would have been the reason. They should have been, though. They should have been escalated.
So on notice, if you could provide us with an explanation about why they were not escalated.
I certainly can.
In your submission to this Senate committee in regards to the previous Optus outage, at paragraph 39, much is made of the communication to government, and listed in there is the Office of the Prime Minister. In your timeline, it identifies that Optus received an email from a senior advisor in the Prime Minister's office at 17:58. It says, email from Senior Advisor, Prime Minister's Office to Optus Head of Regulatory and Government Affairs. In the explanation it says, Optus Head of Regulatory and Government Affairs receives an email from Senior Advisor, Prime Minister's Office requesting, and I quote now, all relevant information on yesterday's outage, which the department has just informed me about. But in the timeline, there's no further reference to any communications, email or otherwise, with the Prime Minister's office. And I'm wondering if Ms Ros could provide some additional information in regards to interactions with the Prime Minister's office at various levels, and whether or not that and other emails were responded to, and whether or not you might make available to the committee what information was provided to the Prime Minister's senior advisor and when.
Thank you, Senator. There was further engagement with the Prime Minister's office after that time frame. As I don't have it in front of me, I will take that on notice and will update and provide the information of when that engagement was made.
Why is it omitted? Engagement with the Prime Minister's office is a top-of-mind key KPI of a corporate affairs or regulatory function, I would have thought. Why is it mentioned once but not conclusively?
Because, Senator, we've made the decision for the purposes of this session to cut the timeline at the 24th. What I will do is ensure that we have the full detail of our engagement with the Prime Minister's office ongoing. We can take that on notice and provide that.
And who in the Prime Minister's office were you communicating with?
Yes, we can do that.
So which other employees of Optus or employees of Singtel have had communications on this matter with the Prime Minister's office, including the Prime Minister himself?
There has been engagement with my government relations team, as you would imagine. We have had subsequent briefing, as we did with others, such as Senator Hanson-Young with the Prime Minister's office since then. But as to the finite details of the engagement back and forth between my government relations team and the Prime Minister's office, I will have to take that on notice.
And have any senior executives or board members of Optus or Singtel engaged with the Prime Minister himself or the Prime Minister's office on this matter?
Senator, I can tell you that I have not personally engaged in that way. So far as Singtel is concerned, I am not aware. I'm not aware of any such engagement.
To be clear, Senator, the Chief Executive and I have had an engagement with the Prime Minister's office, as we did with the Shadow Minister for Communications, as well as Senator Hanson-Young.
I'm particularly interested to know when.
I can get that date for you. Someone can provide that with me. Provide that to me.
So again, Ms Ross, I would have thought engagement with the Prime Minister's office, engagement with the Prime Minister himself, if that is what has happened, would be key information for inclusion in this timeline, and I would add, for reference in other parts of the submission. So this instance, and I suspect there are others, and you're going to provide information to the committee about that, this instance is identified in the timeline, but the communication with the Prime Minister's office doesn't appear anywhere else in your submission. I would have thought that that was a key regulatory feature that should be disclosed.
Senator, we can take that on notice. There is obviously we could do a timeline, you know, till today.
Mr. Reid, there is a timeline, and we've just discovered it's not.
I understand that. We chose to give the detail until really the end of the day of the 19th, Senator. We can get that. There was no reason for leaving it out other than we just went until effectively I had done a press conference and then a few events after that, and then we basically gave a shortened version past that. There was no reason to leave it out other than that, so we will provide that to you.
Mr. Rue, at page 18 of your submission, it says a project meeting with the platform owners to review the scope of changes and discuss impact assessments was held on the 8th of September. So this is part of the planning, etc.
Yes.
And then the following sentence says, some of the required members of the Optus Core Networks engineering team were not present at the meeting.
That's correct.
And then when I continue to read through pages 18 and 19, I get the strong impression that they should have been there, and that might have mitigated against some of the errors that happened subsequently. Is my interpretation of the importance of that remark correct?
Your interpretation is correct, Senator. And again, is why we laid it out. There's no denying, which is why we put it there, that there was project. What normally happens is you would have a project team of multiple engineers would pre-meet to effectively plan an upgrade such as this, and then the project manager would use that group, if you like, to ensure instructions were accurate that were sent. And as you can see, that there were meetings held where not everybody attended. You can then see that instructions were provided by Optus to Nokia personnel to do a certain change, and then from then the various checks were not picked up.
Why were they not at this meeting, given that it was I might identify it as the first point of what became sort of systemic failure across...
It is the first point of failure.
So why weren't they there? And if it is the first point of failure, why were they not there, and why was that not identified earlier as a failing?
Well, if you go through it, Senator, I think unfortunately there are 10 points of failure through this, and this was the first one.
Well, I was going to go through them individually, but I won't now.
We can go through each of those.
So what is the set of circumstances that meant that those, and you say some of the required members of the Optus Core Networks engineering team were not present? Why were they not present?
I don't know, Senator, and they should have been.
And no one sought to inquire?
I think the project, as I understand it, the project manager were chasing those individuals for their input post that date, but they should have been at that meeting, Senator. There's no denying it, which is why we put in our submission.
We often hear human error as an excuse for technical failures.
Yeah.
We often hear that no matter how advanced the technology is, we can't actually mitigate for complete reliability, 100% reliability. But reading through the submission late last night, and thank you for making it available to the committee before today. It has been very helpful. I can't help but think that there's been systemic failure across Optus. What is the culture at Optus that is allowing this systemic failure to take place? And Optus prides itself on being, trusted, deliverer of choice, very important for the delivery of competition in the Australian telco market. What has happened in the organisation?
So there's a couple of things here, Senator. I think, again, the process of even those people should have been at the meeting and the right instructions should have been sent. But even then, there were checkpoints in both Optus and Nokia's case. There were checkpoints that is actually designed to catch mistakes. In one case, there are three separate individuals, 2 offshore, 1 onshore, who are supposed to sign off on a particular change being without risk, if you will. Even then, there is meant to be a process whereby it comes back to a team in Australia. Even then, there are alerts. So that actually, there's 2 issues here. There are adequate controls in place. The extra work that we've put since then has been to do, if you like, belt and braces and more, but those controls themselves were sufficient to prevent this occurring. What happened was people didn't follow the process. That's the first thing. The second thing, your question about culture. I tried to be succinct in my opening statement, but I was clear about what work that I was instigating, which is around, do we have the right processes? Yes. But do we have the right accountabilities? And do we have the right capability? Do we have the right, and that's not just people, it's also how people work together. It's also the systems capability of systems as well. The control, again, what Australians can be assured we have those controls in place, just people didn't follow, they didn't effectively do their job. So what you're seeing here is people not turning up to meetings who should.
Rue,
that gets back to accountabilities.
I couldn't quite find it again in your submission, but there isn't an obtuse statement that suggests that some people have lost their jobs.
Senator, what we are, I don't know where that statement is. What we...
It was not. It was a bit obtuse, and I wish I had. But has anyone lost their...
Senator, what again, my judgment is that I wanted to make sure that Dr. Schott had completed an independent review.
No. I think Mr. Rue is answering.
And not to do anything to preempt an independent finding. What I can assure you is that when that independent finding is published, I will, in conjunction with the board, will review its findings and we will act upon those findings.
But you've also said a copy of the report will be made to this committee.
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming that is the full report.
That is.
That will be the full report.
Yes, it will.
Finally, from myself, there are other questions, but I'll. In evidence to this committee at the Senate estimates process, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Communications, who was the acting secretary at the time, Mr. Chisholm, made some remarks in regards to the department having made preparations, coached the minister in regards to simulation plans or simulation exercises around outages. Is Optus aware of those simulation plans, those simulation exercises? Did you participate in any of them?
There was a simulation that took place, yes, a few weeks ago. I don't have the date in front of me.
A few weeks ago?
A few weeks. It was after this tragic event.
But Mr. Chisholm's advice makes it sound as if the simulation was in advance of the outage that actually happened. And my question is, has Optus been involved in any of those discussions, preparations, planning?
I might have been there was one a few weeks ago, but to answer your question, are you aware of that?
There was a simulation on the 20th of October, Senator, as to simulations conducted by networks teams prior to this incident. We'd have to take that on notice.
And I'm specifically interested in what sort of communication relationships or involvement with the Department of Communications and the simulation plan that Mr. Chisholm talks about in his evidence to the Estimates Committee.
I'd have to take on notice specific conversations with the department about simulations. However, I can confirm, as you would expect, as a telco provider, we have ongoing and regular communication and meetings with the department.
One last question, if I may. I just looked at the organisational chart, probably a question for both Mr. Arthur and Mr. Rue. Telecommunications in our country is heavily regulated.
Yeah.
I would have thought, given the scale of the regulation, given how intrinsic it is to safety at various levels, that the regulatory affairs function of the organisation would be more obvious and have higher prominence in the organisation.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm assuming it's sort of in the Chief Corporate Affairs and Marketing Officer role held by Ms. Ross.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
It's a significant part of her responsibilities, is the regulatory affairs. I mean, I have I've also appointed a Chief Security and Risk Officer to report directly to me. That's not quite regulation, but it's a similar vein of questioning. So I have reporting to me from the 1st of December. I have someone in an acting role doing it at the moment, a Chief Security Officer, and I have Ms Ross directly reporting to me regarding regulatory matters.
This is generally the final question. In the submission, it talks about reliability of the network and uses European comparisons, and I think that the Optus network enjoys a reliability factor, if that's the correct word, of around 99.2% or something. I'm interested to know, how does Singtel's network, how do you measure the reliability of Singtel's network across the full Singtel network, because we know that it operates not just in Singapore and not just in Australia. So is there a particular measure that you might be able to provide on notice that identifies the reliability of the Singtel network across the whole Singtel operation? And I'd be interested in understanding what regulatory failures, if any, Singtel has had in other jurisdictions in which it operates.
I don't know that information, obviously, but I can take that on notice.
Yep.
Senator, Singtel has its own network in Singapore. Optus has its own network here. Each of Singtel's regional associates have their own networks. I'm not aware of any aggregated statistic being prepared, but I will ask.
And because there's obviously aggregated statistics for Europe, but I'd be interested to know, Mr Arthur, as well, what regulatory compliance issues may have arisen in other jurisdictions where Singtel operates. You can take it on notice.
I can take that on notice, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go back to the first day, on the 18th of September. Mr Rue, when were you first told that there had been a failure of 000 calls?
Again, I think that's on the timeline, Senator.
I've had a look through it and I can't tell exactly when you were first informed. So if you could help us with that.
Senator, it is on the timeline. It's on the 18th, obviously, that day, at 14:51.
14:51. Phone call from Optus Director. Where does it...
No, Senator, it's at 14:51. We were in a...
hang on.
Sorry.
Are we missing a page or something? You've got... Oh, sorry, 14:51. Yes, okay. 14:51, Optus Executive Committee, including the Optus CEO, verbally notified of the 000 outage. What were you told at that time?
I was told at that time, we were in an executive meeting, which is why it was verbal and why it was the whole executive meeting at the time. We were told that there had been a 000 outage. I can't recall if it said how many states, but we've been told there had been a 000 outage and that it had impacted 10 missed calls and the welfare checks were going to commence and that the outage had been resolved.
Okay, so at 14:51 or close to 3 p.m. on the Thursday, you were told there'd been an outage and that people couldn't call 000. When were you told that that number had jumped to not 10 calls but 100?
I was told the next communication with me was the following morning on the Friday, Senator, that we talked about earlier.
So you were told in an executive meeting at 2:51 p.m. there had been an outage. It had affected 10 calls. Your company then goes on to find out that it, in fact, wasn't 10, it was tenfold that. It was 100, and no one updated you.
That's correct, Senator.
Is that a failure?
There is, you can see through this.
No.
I'm answering your question. You can see through this that there are escalation failures on multiple times within the company. That's one that you're pointing out. Others are what we talked about earlier in terms of escalating what the welfare checks were uncovering.
So, who is responsible within Optus to have updated the ACMA on the Thursday that the information they had been given that it was 10 calls was wrong, and that it was 100, and that they were going to have welfare checks on 100 calls, not just 10? Whose job is that?
The obligation to inform the ACMA revolves around there being a significant network outage.
Well, do you think from 10 to 100 makes it more significant?
The information, again, was to inform the regulator around the outage, and the outage had been resolved. But
you, Mr. Root, I'm struggling to understand how what alarm bells weren't rung that the information you had given to the regulator was false. You knew on the Thursday that it was false. Your company knew on the Thursday that it wasn't 10 calls, it was 100. That is significantly different, isn't it?
So Senator, as I said to you 2 minutes ago, there should have been escalation within the company. But what the teams were doing was going through what turned out, again, I tried to outline this in my opening statement. We had, to try and explain, we had an unusual event whereby there was the core network in one location was what we call locked or shut down in simple terms. But that had the effect of 000 calls not working, but non-000 calls acting as normal. The secondary effect of that, though, was that the normal way that you pick up missed 000 calls is off this very piece of equipment that was locked. And therefore, the team had to find alternate methods to which are not usual, alternate methods of finding out what those the number and what the telephone numbers of those missed calls were from elsewhere in the network. So what was in the minds of the people were, number one, getting welfare checks completed. And yes, you're right, it turned out to be a larger number, getting them completed. And secondly, going through a process of extracting data in a non-standard way to find out whether other missed calls. That was what was in the minds of the people. What was not done was escalate that to senior management, and therefore to me.
Well, that's not quite correct, is it? Because at 8:05 p.m. on the Thursday, there was a text message exchange from the Director of Security and Public Safety from within your company to your Chief Corporate Affairs and Marketing Officer. I assume that's Ms. Ross. So you knew at 8:05 that in fact it wasn't 10 calls, it was 100, didn't you?
Senator, at 8:05 I was informed that they believed it was now 100 calls they were looking at. They then later on notified me that welfare checks were commencing.
Not on 10 calls, but on 100, assumably.
Yes. Looking back, and given what I now know, and that it had not been escalated through other parts of the company, I definitely wish I had spoken to the CEO.
Ms. Ross, were you the individual who at any point contacted ACMA or the Minister's office?
No, I did contact the Minister's office on the Friday in relation to the death, Senator.
It was me who contacted the ACMA.
No, to give the wrong information earlier in the day. Who gave that information?
the information as we knew it at the time.
That turns out to be deadly wrong. Who gave that information that it was 10 calls?
That was someone in my team, Senator, but that is the information that we knew at the time.
Yes, but then at 8:05 you knew that wasn't the case.
Yes, and I knew that the teams would be working through that information so we could provide a further update.
But you didn't provide a further update, did you?
I'm just checking that, Senator, in terms of, I can't see from the timeline the exact confirmation of the 100, but I can take that on notice.
You didn't give any other update to the ACMA or the Minister's office until Mr Rue called later the next day in the afternoon to say it was actually more like 603 people were dead. So you didn't give any further information or update, even when you knew on the Thursday night that it was worse than you had previously informed the government. I mean, this just... if this is how you run your organisation, no wonder it's in a mess. No wonder.
Our job was to complete those welfare checks, Senator, and then similarly...
No, your job was to make sure the information you had given to the government was not false, and it was.
Our job was to complete the welfare checks and to extract any other numbers that may have been missed so that we could continue on with welfare checks. That's what the team were focused on.
Mr Rue, you said to me that you couldn't tell the government or the regulator, you didn't feel like you could tell them any more information until much later, even though you knew people had died, you knew it was much worse, much later on the Friday afternoon, because you were completing things. And yet in here, there is the first tranche. It says the first tranche of welfare checks were complete. In fact, it was completed, it says in your own timeline, at 21:33 on the Thursday night.
That's correct.
Why didn't you update the government then?
Because, Senator, again, the team were working to see whether any further numbers...
It says tranche 1, complete.
The team were working to extract any further information. The information of what had been learned through those welfare checks we talked about earlier was sent at, I think it was 25 minutes after midnight by email, wasn't picked up until the next day, it wasn't informed to me till later. As I said, escalation did not occur within the company. But again, we were doing the welfare checks, and when the information was available, we knew that was accurate. We informed the ACMA, the department, the Minister's office. And once again, Senator...
I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back, because it says on your own timeline that at 21:33 on the Thursday night, first tranche of welfare check calls completed, and in that completion, 2 fatalities had already been identified. In fact, the welfare checks only took an hour, didn't they? And in that hour, you found that 2 people had died.
And that information was transmitted to management via email at 25 minutes past midnight.
So who in your senior management team, when you found out that at 8 o'clock, because you've got Ms Ross here, who at least knows, who else knew at 8:05? You've got the Director for Security and Public Safety. Sounds like a good position to know that something's going wrong. So you had at least 2 of your executives who knew at 8 o'clock that, in fact, it was much worse than you had previously been informed. And then at 9:30, you knew 2 people had died.
Well,
who in the senior management team, in your group of executives, between 9:30 and midnight, were being proactive at all about working out what had happened when those 100 welfare checks were being done?
So the senior management was not informed until that email went. And as I said, picked
Ms
up
Ross
in the morning.
isn't senior management?
Ms Ross was aware that there was, yes, she is senior management. Ms Ross was aware that there were further welfare checks beyond 10, yes. The import of what information that was learned through those welfare checks was not communicated until that email, which was not picked up the following morning.
Who's your Director of Security and Public Safety?
That is someone, Senator Hanson-Young, who reports to me.
So one of your staff is the one who told you that it was 100 calls?
Yes, that they believed it was 100 and that they were commencing welfare checks.
And so when did they find out that 2 people had died?
I would have to double check, but I believe they also did not know until the morning of the 19th of September.
So you're telling me you went from 10 calls being outed, had failed, to 100. Welfare checks sound pretty serious. You're actually calling to see if people still need help, actually, and then to find out that, in fact, 2 people have died. You didn't have your team, and there was no one else on the executive who was keeping an eye over that period.
An email was sent at 12:25 a.m.
I'm asking about what happened between 9:30 p.m. when the welfare checks on your own documentation says were complete. And 2 people were found to be dead. You already knew that. You'd found it out in that hour. Someone in your company already knew that.
The people conducting the welfare checks, obviously, who had made those calls, knew that. They communicated that several hours later. The management team at that time as I said earlier, were working on a non-standard way of finding out whether other 000 calls...
Ms Ross, had you gone home? Were you at home at this time? When you found out there was 100 calls, that it would have failed, and it wasn't 10, where were you?
I am presuming I might have been at home, Senator. I would again have to look through...
Was there anyone in management who actually was watching what was going on at this period when you realised 100 calls hadn't got through to the ambulance? Was there anyone on your team, Mr Roux, aside from the poor people who were doing the calls, who are clearly not management?
I'd have to check, Senator. I'll have to take that on notice to see who was where.
Did you think this was a serious incident?
I did think it was a serious incident that there were... Obviously thought it was a serious incident that the 000 network had missed, as I understood at the time, 10 calls. I knew that welfare checks would have been made, and I had anticipated that if any events had come out of that my team would tell me. As I said to you earlier, I found out the following morning the extent of what had occurred.
What was going on between 9:30 and 25 past midnight?
Again, the networks team were working through a non-standard way
I'm
to
not talking
extract
about the
any
networks
further.
team. I'm talking about what was your management team doing once the welfare check was completed to get the information, to inform yourselves?
So the
Was
management...
there any proactive calling? Was there any proactive messaging going on? Was anyone in the organisation in a leadership position thought, we better check back in tonight and see how those welfare checks went?
There was clearly an expectation that if anything had come out of those welfare checks, that would be escalated, and that was not done.
Explain to me how that expectation had been communicated to your team, because it clearly didn't happen. And you weren't even told that there was 100 calls.
I think, Senator, what has occurred here, and again, it's an explanation, not an excuse. What has occurred here is people in a call centre making calls to ask people, do you still need emergency service or not, hearing some devastating news, and then processing it and then finding a way to communicate it.
And as a management team, you left them to deal with that on their own, didn't you?
Well, there was an expectation, Senator, that anything that came out of that would be escalated.
On what basis was that expectation communicated that afternoon when the welfare checks had started? Did you send a message to your team? Because clearly Ms Ross didn't think she had to tell you she knew the calls actually had gone to 100. She's just admitted that. She knew it was a whole lot worse and she didn't tell you.
I understood that the process around making welfare checks was going to be 10 individuals, and that again, the information would have been imparted that those had taken place. So, Senator, I'm not hiding from the fact that there was again, I gave you an explanation, not an excuse. I'm not hiding from the fact that things were not escalated.
Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur, you've heard all of this. And this says to me, your management team is not up to the job. And there was members of the team who knew that it was a whole lot worse, that they'd given misleading information, wrong information to the government. They knew that completing the welfare checks that 2 people had died, and their CEO was totally out of the loop. Like, how can you sit here as the chairperson of Optus and say that this executive team are doing their job?
Senator, as the Chief Executive pointed out, there were, I think, 10 failures here. 10 failures. And if you're asking me whether I am alarmed at that, I can assure you I am. However, this man was brought into this company to make sure we became a company that didn't have 10 failures like that. That's his job. Now, he's partway through this job, and I'm expecting him to finish it, because I never in my life want to be in the position I'm in today where I have to answer these sorts of questions about a company I'm associated with.
Well, is there anyone else on the executive team who's going to get the sack? Because from what I can see, there's been failure from the corporate communications element right through to the CEO.
Senator, if you're asking me whether or not there will be accountabilities here, and accountabilities not just for junior people, then I can assure you that there will be. When the dust settles, and what I mean by that is that we have all of the facts, we have Dr. Schott's report, we have the ACMA investigation outcome, and indeed we have your report. The board will, as is its duty, deal with accountabilities.
Could I ask on notice, Mr Roux and perhaps Ms Ross, was there any other members of the executive team who knew on the Thursday night that it was 100 calls, not 10?
Yes, I believe Mr Baird knew, because his team were working through the extraction I was trying to explain earlier through the from the network. But I can take on notice whether other people who knew.
Who does the Optus community manager report to?
Community manager. Is that Catherine? That's Ms Dyer, Senator.
Could we bring Ms Dyer to the table, please?
Can.
Ms Dyer, could you introduce yourself for the Hansard record?
Certainly, Senator. I'm Catherine Dyer, the Chief Operating Officer at Optus.
Ms Dyer, so were you the one, it was your team that was doing the welfare calls?
That's correct, Senator.
And where were you on the Thursday night?
I was travelling from Sydney back to Melbourne.
That's a short flight, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry, was that evening when the welfare checks were being done?
Yes.
Yes.
On the Thursday evening?
Yes, I flew out that evening, yeah.
So you were out of Communicado for what? An hour and 15 minutes?
That's correct, Senator.
When were you told that your team had to conduct 100 welfare checks rather than 10?
I found out at around 8:30 the next morning. I was under the opinion that there were 10 calls that needed to be made and that they were in hand. I did not find out about the unfortunate deaths and the additional calls until the next morning.
So who was in charge then, if it wasn't you?
So the team leader was in place and responsible for the activity. So if I can just perhaps give you some more information about what was going on. This scenario had never been contemplated. So previously our process had been very much set up for a network outage, and what would typically occur with the network outage is customers would receive an SMS from Optus. In this circumstance, because it was, I guess, an example that we'd never encountered before, we were unable to SMS those customers. So therefore, we diverted to a manual process, and those customers were called. That led to some delay by the time we received that information from the networks team to actually set up the calls, set up the, remove and add prefixes, etc., to conduct those calls. So they were conducted as rapidly as they could. And Senator, just one further point between the time of the completion of those calls to that email being summarised by the team leader. The people conducting these...
You mean the email that says that people had died?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. So the people conducting these welfare checks, the purpose of the welfare check is quite simplistic in nature. It is, do you still require emergency services? We note that you've not been able to connect. It's a yes or no response. So where it's a yes, they obviously facilitate the call. Where it's a no, that's noted down that they don't need any further assistance. So the priority of those 6 team members that evening was to complete those 100 calls as rapidly as possible. Their next activity after they did that was they then had to get the telephone numbers and all of the customer addresses, because once you send that information to the authorities, they obviously need the customer's name, the phone number and the address. That took them that period of time to complete all the additional information.
They did the welfare checks within an hour. They were pretty speedy.
That's correct.
Who on your...
Was only 10?
No, there was 100.
Okay.
Yes. Ms Dyer, who was managing your team during that hour?
It was the team leader of that team.
And you didn't think you should give them a call at any point when you got off your flight to say, how did it go?
Senator, I was unaware. I was absolutely unaware that what was going on with those 100 calls.
Do you think that's a failure of yours?
Senator, I wish I'd known. I was unaware. This information did come to light from our networks team, and thinking back about how we potentially could have been advised or kept up to date, but the networks team was still working through the details. So
why wouldn't you be proactive? Why wouldn't you say, what's the outcome of the welfare calls? Because we knew in the afternoon you were undertaking welfare calls. You're an executive of Optus. Why wouldn't you say, have we got everything under control? Are there any adverse outcomes from the welfare checks?
Senator, that's a great question. Previously, when we've completed this exercise, and the contact centres have been reporting to me for 4 months, I've just newly joined Optus, the most welfare checks we've ever conducted before under this process was 38, and it's quite a simplistic approach. So,
but that's not my question. My question is simply, why didn't you ask? What were the outcome of those welfare checks?
Senator, the purpose of those welfare checks is to simply check: do you require emergency assistance?
But
yes
isn't
or no?
That's a core
That's the
job.
point.
It's a core job of having the licence, of providing. It is the obligation of having a licence and being able to provide that 000 service. And you knew that at least 10 calls hadn't gone through. You weren't informed of the 100. I mean, I think that is extraordinary. But you knew there was 10. Is it because 10 didn't seem enough for you? Was 10 not serious enough?
Senator, we do conduct welfare checks on quite a frequent basis. So we do see calls that drop from our network. We make welfare checks every day, up to 10 calls a day. If we see customers that are having difficulty with our network and with 000. So it's not uncommon for a telco to be making welfare checks. I was, again...
But isn't there a process that requires your team, if there's an adverse outcome of a welfare check, aren't they required to tell you straight away?
Senator, this scenario was unprecedented, and I have spoken to the team leader of the group that took these calls. She's a very experienced person, and we spoke about why she didn't escalate them through to leadership, and she said she really struggled with whether she should do that or not, and realising it was at midnight. And she said she wished she'd made a different decision, and that's one part of the process we have since corrected.
Senator Cadell.
Thank you. I want to take a different tone in a different area. I think we've prosecuted what we think, and it's unanimous. I'm not, just because I'm going down a different path doesn't mean I don't believe anything that's said. When we talk about, I feel we're back to deja vu where we were downstairs on a few issues. In your report, you mentioned that Nokia went through the program for the SBG program, the soft lock, hard lock process. Yeah. And I believe in there you say that it was peer reviewed, but it was peer reviewed by 3 others in Nokia. Correct. That was one of my concerns last time, was that all the stress tests were actually being carried out by the people that wrote the programs. Under your program that was approved in May, and I note you say you are got the system to remove it, would more Australian Optus employed people be involved in that process when that was complete versus what happened?
When the activity, when the change in instant, in this case, activities are brought back to an Optus network operating centre, all of those checks will be performed by Optus employees.
Okay. I need you to be successful. Australia needs a third telco. So everything we're saying here today, or from my perspective, is about how can we have faith that the changes being made will give us what Australians deserve and what you deserve. So when I go to that, was these 10 points of failure, was it a process of individual failure or system failure, given there were so many? What are the changes in place? And was it that what the SBG thing straight away, was it a personnel failure or a system failure that allowed that to happen?
So this is totally personnel failure. It's not a design failure. It's not a control failure. It is starting from when Senator Smith was asking you about the people not turning up to meetings, all the way through, which we've categorised deliberately so you can see it with fully transparently what occurred. And I'm sure Dr. Schott's report will also highlight this, all the way from the meetings not being attended through to the alerts not being acted upon. And there are 8 other steps on the way, Senator. So this is not a complicated system issue. This is not system failing. This is not equipment. This is not lack of resilience in the network. This is not underinvestment. This is simply process and controls not in place. Oh, sorry, controls in place, but the process to ensure those controls are followed, not being followed.
Interestingly, in estimates, there was a lot of he said, she said over email addresses, email times and everything like that. Is the CI alerts at infrastructure email still being operated to your knowledge?
I'll have to defer that to Ms Ross.
Senator, the email address, to the best of my knowledge, is still being operated, yes.
So the one that the government claimed or the department claimed shouldn't have been sent to is still being used by the department?
To be clear, Senator, there was a change to that email address in terms of outage notifications, and that was requested to from a regulatory perspective or from a perspective of outage notifications on the 11th of September. On the 12th of September, we changed the outage notification address, and we've subsequently sent over 200 emails to the new address. In relation to non-mandatory notifications, I do believe that email address is still being utilised. However, I accept that on this occasion, that email was not picked up initially.
I'm sure there's some other questions. I just want to go around it. This gets to the core of me needing you to be successful. We don't need 2 telco operators in Australia. We need 3. I know there's a lot of small ones, predominant emails. You came from, and you've been in similar composite as NBN before. You're here today. What you went in knowing the process of the last interview, these things going forward. There's been questions about your leadership today. I will say the clarity around the information and timeline is significantly different and better than the last estimate, so that gives me some confidence we're heading in the right direction. There is some clarity, there's some information as opposed to last time, so I thank you for that. What do you need to be successful to give us confidence that Optus won't do this again? Because 2 strikes is stretching it, 3 strikes and this is a joke, and there will be no support or no desire to assist you at all.
Senator, thank you for those sentiments. I joined Optus because exactly for the reason that you said. The industry, and the community at large needs a strong competitor in the mobile space and obviously in fixed line space too. And it's important that Optus therefore fulfills the potential that it was given back in 1992 when the monopoly situation, if you like, changed. And Optus as a challenger and a customer-focused company must be successful. So that is actually why I joined. And I knew that there were going to be changes that needed to be instigated because the company had I guess, in many ways focused on product. It had focused on serving its customers through new innovative things to run their lives or entertain themselves, wherever it may be. But what needed now to be built was foundations. And the foundations around, again, what I said in my opening statement around clear process management, clear accountabilities, simpler product set, modern systems, both in IT and in engineering, and an uplift in capability in the organisation as well. And so that is the mandate upon, that is what I spoke to the board before I took the job, and that was the mandate upon which I was given when I took the role. So what I need to do is to be able to move on with the change program. It's called transformation in corporate speak, but really the change program that's needed to instigate that capability uplift, that modern systems, that simpler organisation, that much more customer service focused organisation that doesn't have the mis-selling activities that we also had, and to ensure that we are a company that follows process well, but also serves the community well, and does not have instances of failings like we're talking about today. That sadly takes time. Change takes time. What I have done since I started was start with a lot of change in senior management, some of which are here today, but also beneath them, a change, simplifying the company as well with some other decisions that have been made. And although I talked about 150 process people, we were already, that is well in train. But getting new processes in an organisation does take time. Training people up on that and actually making sure they work across the whole company. So I need to be able to get on with that transformation. I have the mandate of the board. You can ask.
You got that in May? Did that board sign off in May for that?
The board, basically the program of work that I'm talking about, I spoke to the board about before I started, before I took the job, before I was offered the role, and then I started to instigate that from when I actually started. There has been things signed off in May progressively, which we tried to summarise quickly in the submission. But Senator, unfortunately, these things take time, and I can assure you, that I am determined to work through those changes and to instigate them at pace. And this only proves further that they need to be done at pace.
Okay, I had a race team briefly and expensively for a period, and we had a rule. You know, you can stuff up anything, but you can stuff it up once. This is twice now in the same area. If this was to happen today, what would happen? How would we not commit the same mistakes today that we committed a month ago?
I think, Senator, they're two mistakes, to use your phrase, in network, but they're terribly different. The one that occurred, again, I wasn't here.
Forget the technical error. What caused that? What would stop the consequence?
The reason why they're different is one was a technical error, as you understand, and the other is a process error.
There was plenty of human errors in that one too, you remember. We're going to rotate Senator Cadell, so I might go to Senator...
if I may, Chair, just on a similar...
Is it following up?
Exactly,
okay, yes, that's fine. And then I'm going to go to Senator...
And it's directed to Mr Roux and to Mr Arthur. Change or transition increases risk in an organisation.
Yes,
Would you agree with that?
Yes, it does.
So you've conceded that it's been necessary to go on a process of change and a process of transition. You know from your own experiences, Mr Arthur, you're an accomplished board director around the country. You're on the risk committee of Singtel.
Not any longer, Senator.
Sorry?
Not any longer. I'm no longer on the risk committee.
You're not on the risk committee, okay. Okay. But you were.
I was.
And you understand risk. And you're the chairman of... You understand risk. So you know you're going through a change program. You're using it as a defence for the unfortunate events that have happened, which you've identified as personnel failings. You can't even lean on technical failings. These are personnel failings. So where was the risk management? Where was the risk management? So,
Senator, if I can start, and then obviously Mr Arthur can add to my answer. But you are quite right. When you go through a change program, you can have risks in doing that as well. Absolutely right, and that's very much foremost in my mind. I have seen in the past change programs that have been done too fast, actually, that actually leads to unintended consequences. And that's one of the reasons why change programs takes time, because you've got to be careful on the way through, although you've also got to accelerate, but you've got to be careful on the way through. That's actually a key risk on our risk register, is the change program, which is why we have set up a transformation office under a very experienced executive in Ms Dyer to make sure that risk is managed in that way. But this is not a change. This is not part of the change program. Sorry, this is not a result of change. This is a result of failings of individuals in following through what they were supposed to do. Part of the change program will bring back some of that work to Australia, but we still have to make sure that we have clear process, everybody knows what they're to do, clear accountabilities and clear control checkpoints. And if that means we've got to put more checkpoints in, we will.
I don't want to preempt the shot review, but based on what you've just said, Mr Roux, it makes it very, very hard for anyone not to be punished.
Well, again, Senator, that's why...
Mr Arthur, I mean,
Yep.
you know, these are personnel failings. These are personnel failings. You know, the level of skill someone brings to the job, the level of pride they bring to the job, the level of earnestness and thoroughness they bring to the job, and, as others have emphasised, people have lost their life. People have lost their life.
Senator, I've made my position on accountabilities very clear this morning, I hope.
Well, we will be holding you accountable, Mr Arthur, as the chairman, and we'll be interested to see what the SHOT review says, what the ACMA review says, and we would expect them to come before this committee before we finalise our deliberations.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Senator Gosh and then back to Senator Henderson, and then we'll have to think about when we get you back in front of us. Yes.
Can I just, sorry, Chair, can I just say some of those personnel failings, of course, are within Nokia.
Yes, that's a very...
Sorry, I just wanted to...
Thank you, Chair. So, from your answer earlier, Mr Arthur, you appointed Mr Roux on the basis that Optus had issues, was in a bad shape before he arrived, and he needs to stay to finish the job and address those issues. Mr O'Sullivan, we appreciate you being here today, thank you. You're the former chair of Optus, and you were responsible for overseeing the running of the company before Mr Arthur. What do you have to say about the state of things as and when they were handed over? Do you agree with Mr Arthur's characterisations earlier about the state things were in and the need for Mr Roux to stay to fix them? And if so, how did they get in such a bad way?
No, thank you, Senator. And I think it's important to talk about the big change that we made last year. So in early 2024, we reconstituted the Australian board of Optus. Prior to that, management and the CEO were reporting through the group, and the role of chair, which I held, was largely advisory. Two main functions. One was to be the escalation point, because there needs to be an Australian citizen, given we have some critical infrastructure for government, and secondly as an advisor to the CEO and to the group. But in early 24, the decision was made to reappoint the CEO and the management to report to the Australian board and the CEO to the Australian chair. And so as we set up that board, it was apparent to us that there are many things that Optus does well, but there are also many things that Optus does not do sufficiently well. And that's why we embarked on a program to recruit a new CEO, to look for someone who had a track record in running a national network and providing strength and stability. Actually, Stephen's track record, particularly during COVID, when he was able to turn on the NBN overnight and allow Australians to work from home and to maintain the reliability of that.
Didn't he?
Sorry?
You turned it on for Andrew Bolt. You bumped him up the VIP list.
Well, one of the things that's remarked on in the industry is how successfully Australia was able to quickly migrate to a work-from-home environment, because we had the bandwidth and the capability to support teams, and that was the NBN. So the board appointed Stephen late 2024. As Stephen said, the mandate he was brought in on was to drive change and to drive a significant uplift in performance. There's been a number of major executive changes subsequently, and there's a program underway to improve the way we operate generally. One of the things I would also say is the decision to bring the networks operations back to Australia and in-house was part of the conversation that was begun last year at the board, and that manifested in the decisions earlier this year. So there's a significant change in governance, followed by a significant focus on uplift, which is what you're hearing about today and is in the submission.
Thank you. Mr Arthur, in relation to that dynamic between Singtel and Optus that's just been alluded to, are all Optus's reporting lines to the business, within the business, to the Optus CEO?
Yes.
Okay. Do any functions report directly to Singtel?
No. No.
And do I understand from what you just said earlier, Mr O'Sullivan, that that was different earlier, prior to that change you referred to?
Yes, so the CEO reported to the group, not to the Australian chair under the former model. And likewise, the governance of management was performed by the group board. And it's also the case that there would have been certain roles within Optus that had a reporting line, a dual reporting line, as I recall, to both a group functional role as well as to an Australian role. That would be my recollection. I can double check that offline.
Senator, the operational management structure pre-2024, as Mr O'Sullivan has described, is what you would describe as a matrix structure. So you had executives with multiple reporting lines. This is very common in big groups, particularly big international groups. However, in 2024, the decision was made at Singtel that it would be better, particularly for Optus, but not just for Optus, but generally around the group, to move to a more, in Optus's case, geographical model. So where all authority, operational authority, resided in the geography. So you lost the complexity of matrix reporting. So that was done. It was also decided that it was in the best interests of Optus to bring governance responsibility for Optus closer to the business. So that was moved to Australia as well. And we now operate under a very different model where the chief executive is reportable to the board through me, and that management is accountable to him alone.
And how does that interact with the answer that Mr Roux gave earlier about the first phone call being to Mr Moon? Was a factor in making that phone call a concern about a Singtel interaction or response to this, or the impact on Singtel?
Senator, I can deal with that.
Okay.
Calling Moon, in my judgment, was exactly the right thing for Mr Roux to do. He needed to tell the board. Now, we had a conversation earlier about the need to tell the board. I can assure you that under best practice Australian corporate governance, the board is told.
Sorry, yes, I appreciate that, but that's not quite an answer.
Not at the expense of the government, not at the expense of the Australian people. You sat there for 6 hours making sure the board knew and the Australian people were left in the dark.
Senator, I'm merely commenting on the fact that the board was told when it was told. That is consistent with best corporate practice.
No,
however, I know where you're going, Senator. At least I think I do.
Okay.
Moon was a director of the Optus board.
Yes.
So in telling Moon, he was telling the Optus board. He knew he couldn't get me. He knew where I was. It was the middle of the night and my phone would be switched off. So he told the Optus board. That was his responsibility. He also killed two birds with one stone because he was also telling Group in Singapore so they could do the things they needed to do there, including, as we discussed earlier, make sure that the governance arrangements in Singtel were followed because they have responsibilities there. They're a listed company. So that's what happened, and I think it's entirely appropriate.
Well, you've just said they're a listed company. What are you referring to when you make that statement? Are you asking, or are you making a statement in relation to their obligations to the Singapore Stock Exchange?
No, I'm talking more generally, Senator, about the fact that they're a public company and they themselves have governance responsibilities and governance procedures that need to be followed.
Was one of your concerns, Mr. Roux, in closing both those loops at the same time, the effect that this information might have on Singtel's share price on the Singapore Stock Exchange?
It never crossed my mind once. What I was purely doing was telling the board of Optus, knowing that there was a lot of things that I needed to put in train that day. It never crossed my mind once.
Okay. Thank you.
There is an obligation to have informed the Australian regulators of what you knew, and you failed to do it for hours and hours and hours.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm going to be as quick as I can. Mr Roux, do you accept you have breached any laws or regulations?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
You haven't considered that?
I'll have to take that on notice.
Well, no, you can't take it on notice if you know the answer to my question.
I need to take it on notice, Senator.
Well,
no, hang on, sorry.
As the chair, Mr. Roux, you either know the answer, and in which case you need to say, or not.
Yeah. So the question is.
I understand that, Chair. I need to take that on notice.
No. I'm sorry. It's not open to you to take it on notice if you know the answer. You can't take something on notice to duck and weave the question.
It's a rule that applies to officials of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a rule that applies to
so you can't duck and weave if you know the answer. You would have considered this in depth. Do you accept you've breached any laws or regulations?
I need to take that question on notice, Senator.
I find that unacceptable, Mr. Roux, because it looks to me as if you have breached at least regulations under Australian law. This is a very important point because the laws and regulations are there to make sure that you comply. So I'm dumbfounded that you are saying that you need to take this question on notice. What can you tell us about your non-compliance with any law or regulation?
Senator, honestly, I need to take that on notice.
Well, I don't accept that. I don't think that's good enough. Mr. Arthur, do you think that's good enough, and can you answer the question?
No, Senator, I can't because I can genuinely say that to date I have been, my focus has not been on the legal position of the company. My focus has been on making sure that we manage through the situation we got ourselves in.
But Mr. Arthur, part of the job of managing is to comply with the law, to comply with your regulatory obligations. That's core business.
Licence conditions are core business.
Core business.
You only get to operate in this country as a telco because of the licence that's given to you via the Australian government on behalf of the Australian people. You have to comply.
Chair, if I can just quickly... I'm astounded by this. This is a massive issue that you're not prepared to address this.
Senator, can I comment, please? There are two issues here. There is, do I understand, does the company understand that it is absolutely bound by Australian law and must follow Australian law and regulation? Yes, I do.
Mr. Arthur, that is not my question.
I know it's not your question.
And please just directly answer my question.
But I do understand that we have to follow the law. But if you're asking me whether, as I sit here, I have received reports from my people on the precise nature of the laws involved here that I may have breached, I haven't.
Wow.
And that's what I'm telling you.
That's extraordinary. There were a number of rules made in April 2025. I've been very critical about the Minister and the regulator because it took 6 months to put those rules into effect on the 1st of November. They include to test 000 calls during an upgrade. Can you please confirm, Mr. Roux, there was no testing during the upgrade?
Senator, there were clear alerts that went off.
No. My question is, can I confirm there was no testing of the 000 service during the firewall upgrade?
I don't believe there was, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Did you submit a management plan before the upgrade to mitigate the risks that might impact the 000 service?
There was a management plan put in place, Senator, yes.
Was that submitted to the regulator?
No, Senator.
Okay, that's also a requirement under the rules. But I will say they don't come into effect until the 1st of November, which is a shocking failure of the Minister and the regulator. Did you advise... Now, we know that you didn't become aware of the outage despite the alerts. Did you advise emergency services of the outage as soon as you became aware, bearing in mind that you had the alert from the South Australian Ambulance Service?
Senator, you can see in our timeline that we did.
I'm acutely sensitive about the privacy of the families of those who died. What can you tell us about those who died, please? And when were those unsuccessful 000 calls made, which resulted in people dying?
Senator, all I can say about the families is that I think on my second or third press conference, I'm not sure which one, I think it might have been the second, I did say that I would, through the authorities in South Australia and Western Australia, ask them to reach out to the families should they wish to meet with me. And I have done that. I have reached out to the authorities and asked them to contact the families if they wish to meet with me.
And have you had any indication they wish to meet with you?
Beyond that, Senator, what I would say is that the privacy of the families must be paramount.
No, I understand that, but have you had any indication that they wish to meet with you?
Senator, the privacy of the families must be paramount.
Well, I understand that, Mr. Roux.
It's not the question she's
That's
asking,
not the
Mr.
question.
Roux.
Have you received any indication or contact from the families that they wish to meet with you? Are they seeking answers? Are they seeking compensation? What has been the interaction? Bearing in mind we're not seeking any identifying information, but what is the status of your engagement with those families?
The status of the engagement is that I asked the local authorities to reach out to the families should they wish to meet me in private.
And has there been any contact back from the families?
Once again, Senator, the privacy of the families is paramount here.
Mr. Roux,
we
understand that, but there is a direct question as to whether have you met them or have you not? Have you had any contact from them or have you not?
Once again, Senator, I've reached out to the families through the authorities.
No, that's not my question, Mr. Roux. Please do not duck and weave. What I've asked, have they indicated that they wish to meet with you? Has there been any other communication directly from the families to you or anyone else at Optus?
I'm giving you a direct answer, and that is that the privacy of the families...
It's not a direct answer.
That is not acceptable, Mr. Roux. That is not acceptable. Please answer the question.
The privacy of the families is paramount.
No, that is not acceptable.
I have done what I said, Senator. I have reached out to the families through the authorities.
No, that's not my question, Mr. Roux. Please advise this committee, have the families indicated that they wish to meet with you or has there been any other communication?
Once again, Senator, the privacy of the families.
Mr. Roux,
these are people...
Mr. Roux, Just to be absolutely clear, you need to answer the direct question.
You are under the rules of Senate estimates. You are required to answer the question.
I have given you my answers.
Well, that is not an answer because you are ducking and weaving the question. Now, it can be a contempt of this committee to not answer questions. So could you please, I will give you another opportunity to provide us with full information.
I have answered the question, Senator.
That is not acceptable.
Is it correct?
Hang on, Chair. Well, Chair, just hang on a minute. That is not acceptable. Mr Arthur, to you as the Chair, that is not acceptable. Are you prepared to answer that question?
Senator, my view is that we should not say anything about the matters you're raising. I totally agree with my Chief Executive that the privacy of the families here, it must be given first priority.
I am not in any way compromising the privacy of the individuals. This is a tragic situation. I am simply asking, what is Optus doing? Has Optus offered compensation? Has there been a meeting? Has there been communications? We are entitled to know, Mr Rue, and I take this issue very seriously, and you risk being in contempt of this committee if you don't answer this question.
So, Senator, as I said, I'm sorry, I'm just going to repeat myself. I've answered.
No, I don't want to hear a repetition, Mr Rue. You either answer the question. If you're not going to answer the question, then we'll consider that.
We will consider our position. I will. Just on the separate issue, has there been discussions or any offer of compensation? Any claim?
I can assure you, Senator, that Optus will do the right thing with compensation. But at this stage, we are under various investigations, which is the reason I answered your question earlier around take it on notice, because we do have an ACMA investigation as one of them. We have obviously the short review. We have this inquiry. And there may well be coronial inquiries as well.
I understand that. So I'm going to go back to my earlier question.
Can I? Sorry. So that they will inform us, Senator, exactly what happened, and importantly, what impacts that had to people. But I can assure you that Optus will do the right thing.
Well, I'm not assured by that, because this starts with being transparent and open with the Australian people. We are here representing the Australian people.
I think, Senator, you can see that our submission is extremely detailed. It's a minute-by-minute timeline of what occurred. We talked at length around the fact
Mr Rue, I've got very limited time, so I'm going to have to move on.
Well, I think we have been transparent.
So, not on this issue, haven't, Mr Rue? So, could you please outline the calls, the unsuccessful 000 calls which resulted in people dying? When were those calls made? Because the first unsuccessful call was 18 minutes after midnight on the 18th of September. The last unsuccessful call was 14:31, so 2:31 in the afternoon on the 18th of September. When were those unsuccessful calls made which resulted in people dying?
I don't have the time with me, Senator, of unsuccessful calls whereby people informed us that they were unable to make a call and a person had passed away.
So you don't have those details?
I don't have the details here,
but
Senator.
they would be details that you would have gathered through your welfare checks.
I don't have the details.
You would have been given the list. When you get the list of unsuccessful calls or failed calls, can you identify at what time that attempt was made?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so on notice, I'm going to ask you for that information, please.
Yep.
I'm also going to ask on notice, could you please provide this committee with all internal documents in relation to this outage, including drafts of your submission and any amendments or proposals before we receive the final submission, or correspondence between Optus and the Minister's Office, Optus and the Prime Minister's Office, Optus and Emergency Services, and Optus and state and territory governments. And when I talk about correspondence, I include text messages, other messaging platforms, emails, letters, diary notes, telephone notes, briefings and advices.
We'll take that on notice, Senator.
And that is a requirement for you to provide all of those information subject to any public interest immunity claim that you might make.
Could I just add to that? I would like the email with the draft talking points that I assume was drafted by you, Ms Ross, at 2:08 p.m. on the Friday.
I just want to also go back. I'm quite suspicious. There was a major incident declared at 13:51 on the 18th of September. The last failed call was 14:31, 40 or so minutes.
Sorry, Senator. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
There was a major incident declared at 13:51 on the 18th of September. The last failed call to 000 occurred at 14:31, so 40 or so minutes later. The outage was resolved 3 minutes later at 14:34.
Yes.
There were then emails sent to the Department and the Minister's Office at 14:45 and 14:51. It looked to me as if you were holding off giving any advice in relation to the outage until it had been resolved, rather than alerting ACMA and the Minister's Office at 13:51 when you knew that there was a major incident and that had been declared.
No, Senator, but maybe Mr Ross might like to answer that. But I think we were... The information that management had to tell authorities, once we had that was provided, I believe. But is that correct, Ms Ross?
At 14:16, I was made aware that there was a network issue. Pre that, the networks team were working through that information, Senator. Between 14:16 at...
No, I can see the timeline.
14:24, Government Relations was made aware, and the first call went at 14:31 to the Minister's Office. So 16 minutes later.
Well, hang on a minute, but that call was not answered, and no message.
Our first attempt.
No message was left. Did anyone think to send a text?
As mentioned earlier, Senator, the person from my team was then drafting an email to the Minister's Office when the Minister's Office rang back.
Okay, so I just want to quick, because I know we've run out of time, just in relation to the two emails that went to the department, and the department led us on a merry dance. These are the two emails at 14:45 and 14:51 on the 18th of September.
Yes.
The department led us on a merry dance, in estimates disgracefully, and particularly one official, Mr Faulkner, when he would not address our questions for a very long period of time until we actually got a copy of the emails. And I have raised concerns through a speech I've given in the Parliament to the Secretary about the lack of frankness from the department. But there were these two emails. Mm-hmm. Apparently they went to the wrong email address, even though the emails were received. Can you ascertain at your end when those two emails were read? I'll go back to you, Mr Rowe. Or if...
I don't know.
Do you operate with read receipts?
I would have to take on notice if we know when they were read. I believe they confirmed back to us on the Monday. I've just been advised from my team they don't send read receipts.
Isn't that a problem? Because when you send an alert, you want to know that the email has been received?
To be clear, Senator, the informing of the department wasn't a mandatory notification. It was a notification that the Government Relations team made to the department. So it was in effect information sharing. The same emails were sent at the same time to the Minister's Office as we've...
Yes, I'm not... That wasn't my question with respect, though.
So you're prepared to do information sharing for the 10 calls, but not information sharing for the 100, and not information sharing for 3 deaths, and not information sharing for 600. I mean, it just does not make sense as to why you behaved like this on the Thursday afternoon and then there was radio silence for 24 hours.
Because again, Senator, on the Thursday afternoon, there was a regulatory requirement which we fulfilled.
You didn't fulfil it. It was wrong.
We fulfilled the regulatory requirement, which was to declare that there was a significant network outage. We informed the Minister's Office, as well as the regulatory requirement, we also informed the department. On the Friday,
Mr. Rue,
on the Friday, I was gathering the information to be able to give accurate information, which was outside of the regulatory obligation.
So the department says that you emailed the wrong email address, and we've gone through that whole saga in estimates. But what I'm asking on notice, if can you please ascertain when those emails were read, at what time?
I think we've answered that. We can take it on notice.
You didn't answer that. You said there was no read receipt. But what I'm asking, is there any way you can ascertain through your back-end systems when those emails were read? You should be able to do that.
We'll look at that, Senator, yes.
And if we could have that information provided on notice, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you all being here today. As you know, this is our first hearing, and we'll put you on notice now that we'll be requiring you to return in the near future. Thank you for your evidence today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
No, so we're just going to have to suspend briefly while we wait for our Deputy Chair to return, but in the meantime we can get representatives from the ACMA to the table. We just let them. We've just done the swap over.
Oh,
so.
great. Thanks.
Thank you. I now welcome representatives from the Australian Communications and Media Authority. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you. We all know the rules in relation to the orders of the Senate in relation to officers of Department of the Commonwealth or State. Officers are reminded that any claim that would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by the Minister and must be accompanied by a statement setting out the basis of that claim. For the Hansard record, Ms O'Loughlin, could we please get you to introduce yourself and the capacity in which you appear, and then we'll get your colleagues to do the same.
Thank you, Chair. Nerita O'Loughlin, Chair and Agency Head, Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Thank you.
Adam Sutcliffe, Deputy Chair, Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Thank you.
Michael Brearley, I'm the General Manager of the Communications Infrastructure Division at the ACMA.
Alan Major, I'm the Executive Manager of the Licensing and Infrastructure Safeguards Branch.
Thank you.
Kathy Rainsford, General Manager, Consumer Division.
Elizabeth Quinn, Executive Manager, Telecommunications Safeguards and Numbers.
Great. Now, Ms O'Loughlin, do you have an opening statement or not?
No, Chair, we don't have an opening statement.
We know that you spoke about this at the estimate session, so we'll go straight to questions then. My first question to you, is there anything that you gave, any evidence that you gave in estimates 3 weeks ago that you think needs correcting?
No, Senator, we've gone back over our estimates testimony and we believe that that's accurate. I would say that obviously the submission by Optus this morning is quite lengthy. We've had a brief look at it. We'd like some time to go back over that, but we don't see anything that's problematic from our side.
Yes, fair enough. I will say to you, we've just had the discussion of the committee here today, and while we're getting you in front of us this morning, we will no doubt require a subsequent hearing with you. I'll go first to the Deputy Chair.
I might actually go to Senator Walker.
Oh, okay, sure. Senator Walker.
Thank you. I've only just got a few quick questions. I'm wanting to understand, does the Minister for Communications have any legal or formal responsibilities of some sort during a network outage impacting communications?
Senator, the obligations around network outages are really on the telcos. So both in terms of the emergency call service determination, where they have obligations to notify the ACMA and also notify the emergency call person, as in Telstra. They also have obligations under the major outages determination under the significant local outages. So the obligations are very much on the telcos to advise various stakeholders of what is going on. But I'll ask my colleague Kath Rainsford if she wanted to add anything to that.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. So off the back of that, how do telcos advise ACMA when there are a number of callers impacted by an outage like this? And would you mind sort of expanding what happened in this case?
So generally, in terms of the emergency call service determination, it's usually via email, and I'd say the major outages are often via email and the local outages are via email as well. So there's a direct email into our team. Kath, did you want to go into any further detail on what happened in this circumstance?
Only to say that in this circumstance, the email notification we received on the 18th of September was a notification that was framed in response to the significant network outage obligations under the emergency call services determination. We did not receive any notification pursuant to the communications outages standard, and I think that's reflective of Optus's position heard this morning and in its submission that it does not think those positions were triggered. That is something we are looking into as part of our investigation into this matter.
And Senator, we received 2 email notifications on the 18th, both of which were incorrect in terms of timing. They also went to that the issue with emergency call services had been resolved by the time we received the emails.
Okay. And where does the department fit in with all of this?
So in terms of the ECS determination, the requirement is to notify the regulator and the emergency call person, but usual protocol is to also notify the department, and in major circumstances, I think it would be normal to notify the Minister's office.
Thank you. Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms O'Loughlin, we just heard from Optus, and the argument that they make for not informing you or the government for 24 hours that this outage was indeed much more significant, hundreds of failed calls, and resulted in 3 deaths, is because it was outside their regulatory obligations. Now, that seems extraordinary to me, that they informed you at 2 p.m. on the Thursday. They knew by 8 p.m. that same day that it was more calls. They didn't update. They knew by midnight, in fact, they knew by 9:30 that people had died. Then later on in the day on Friday, we find out it's actually closer to 600 calls. And if they don't have an obligation to correct misinformation, like, what is the point? They can just say whatever they want, whenever they want, and then beg for forgiveness.
Senator, I think the information provided and the way in which it was communicated against the regulatory requirements will form part of the investigation that we're undertaking at the moment. So we will dig through all of that. As been explained here today, and also as we went through in our estimates testimony, we found it surprising that there was no update.
Do you? I understand you are running a review and investigating this, but are you alarmed at the statement that correcting the misinformation and informing you as the regulator how significant and deadly this outage was, that it was outside their regulatory obligations?
I prefer not to give an opinion on those statements, Senator. All I can say is that we will investigate the matters against the regulatory requirements that Optus have under the law. But I think, as we have pointed out previously, there was a very long period of time between the first notification that matters had been resolved, the phone call that we received that said that there were 10 calls on a fixed line network, and that was the limitation of what was affected. Our questioning at that time about whether we could get updates on that, and the only update we got was over 18 hours later when the CEO of Optus rang me.
Why didn't you pick up the phone and call if you thought this was weird? Odd, I think, was the phrase that was used in Senate estimates. Why didn't you pick up the phone and demand?
Proactive.
Why didn't you pick up the phone and demand an update?
And Senator, that's what we will look at in terms of our own processes. I think, our expectation was that we would be kept informed by Optus. That was not the case, but that is something that we need to take on board as well about our processes. But our expectation would be that the telco, in that circumstance, would have kept us up to date on significant changes to the information that they had provided. That was not the case. But we take on board that that's something that we may have needed to follow up, and that is something that we're looking at in terms of our... We'll need to follow up, and we will look at our internal processes.
And Optus clearly don't think they have to inform you of serious outages or the numbers the numbers don't matter, and they obviously didn't think that they have an illegal obligation to inform you of whether there's a deadly result. And doesn't that say something about how they view you as a regulator? And they clearly don't take you seriously.
Senator, that's a question you have to put up to Optus, not to me. Basically, there are regulatory requirements on Optus, and we will investigate those Optus, and we will hold them to account against those regulatory requirements.
Is the obligation of the telecommunications company just to inform you of the outage, or is there a requirement to inform you the extent of the outage?
There are different requirements, which I might get Cathy to go through with you, Chair.
So, Senator, there are a number of regulatory obligations that fall into place here. Certainly under the ECS, the Emergency Call Services Determination, as it was in place at the time of this outage, there was a requirement to advise us of that where there is a significant network outage, and whether or not, well, certainly what we got, raised real questions about whether it was accurate, and we will be looking into what Optus knew at that point in time and how that translated to the information that was provided to us. The other obligations under the communications outages standard involve potentially a series of notifications, so notifications to us and a range of other parties where the telco becomes aware that there is an outage, which fits the definition of either major or significant local outages, and there are requirements around what they need to tell us to the extent they know it at that point in time. Then, to the extent they obviously need to tell us when it's resolved as well. That's a legal requirement. And in the intervening period, they have to provide updates either every 6 hours for the first 24 hours and each 24 hours afterwards, or where there is a significant change in events.
Significant change in events?
That's under the outages standard.
So,
yes.
Optus's excuse to us this morning was that they informed you that the outage had been resolved, so they didn't believe they had any obligation to inform you that what the information they'd previously provided was both wrong and significantly wrong. That's a problem, isn't it?
They are certainly matters, Senator, that we are digging into as part of our investigation. So we look at what information the range of Optus entities involved had available at the relevant points along the way, and how that information translated into it meeting or not its regulatory obligations.
Because if we're just leaving it up to the telecommunications company to tell the regulator these matters when they see fit, there is no... there's clearly not a culture within Optus to inform you of the significant change. They think, oh, well, tick and flick, we've told you it happened, it's been resolved, we don't have to let you know anymore. I mean, I would put it to you, the only reason they told you is because they were worried. They had to tell you because it was about to get out. They were about to tell the Singapore Stock Exchange the news would be out there, they would have to tell you. They're arguing that regulatory requirements they had fulfilled. But because you didn't pick up the phone and you didn't chase them up, they've been let off the hook.
Senator, they won't be let off the hook. That will be a matter of our investigations against the ECS determination, which requires them to provide emergency call services to Australians. And that's the core of the ECS. And then on top of that, there are these notification outages requirements. Those will be things that we will look at from a regulatory perspective and hold them to account against those rules. The other thing I would probably add to that is that obviously with the passage of the 000 custodian does give another boost to the system in terms of requiring information, and the new rules that have been put in since this outage require further information to be provided by telcos along the way, not just when something goes wrong, which is where the regulator really steps in to look at whether things have...
But you could have done that, couldn't you? You could have stepped in. You could have been pushing them and being proactive and
yes,
asking...
Senator, and I think we take that criticism on board.
Mm-hmm. Who I think it was you, Ms Ransford, who characterised the 10 calls as seeming oddly low for an outage.
Yes, Senator. So that was in the context of the 2:42 p.m. call from Optus to one of my staff on the 18th of September, where they conveyed that they had identified that there had been an outage, that approximately 10 000 calls from WA and SA had failed since an upgrade that had been implemented early that morning, and that problem had only impacted fixed line calls, that Optus had rolled back the upgrade that caused the outage and was undertaking its welfare checks. They in that context, Optus advised that they would provide information when that was available that day or the next morning. My staff member said 10 seemed, well, remarked to the effect of 10 seemed low given this related to 2 states, and was advised that that was the information that Optus had available to it at that point in time.
And was that remark made to Optus? To the person down the phone?
Yes, that's right.
And do we know who that individual was?
It was the Director of Security and Public Safety in the Government and Regulatory Affairs team.
So that Optus employee heard directly from the regulator that 10 calls seemed odd?
Yes.
When then there was a second email?
So that was a phone call.
That was a phone call?
That was a phone call, Senator. Then we got an email at 3:17 p.m. That was from the Principal of Major Incident Management in the Optus operations team. It was framed, as I said earlier, as a notification under Section 27 of the Emergency Call Services Determination. And it advised that, it incorrectly advised, among other things, of an outage on the 19th of September. So that date was corrected 10 minutes later. But that the outage was affecting mobile users who were unable to dial emergency calls from South Australia, WA and Northern Territory. Again, it advised it had been resolved at that point in time, and there was no further update on the number of customers impacted.
Did you or anybody in your team see that email that said it was mobile, but you knew that they'd previously said it was landline? and think, we'd better get some clarification here?
Senator, yes, that was observed by at least one of the team, and they were awaiting the promised callback from Optus, so they were waiting for that clarification.
So you just waited and waited and waited.
As the Chair said, we have taken that on board, and that is something that we will be making sure we're more proactive with.
Because not only was 10 calls a low and oddly low number for 2 states, but you had conflicting information. You were told it was landline, and then you got an email saying it was mobile.
That is correct, but at all stages it was a resolved issue. We had no reason to believe it was an ongoing outage.
But what's the resolved got to do with it if Optus has a legal obligation under their licence conditions, under the law, to provide that service? Surely you would have realised, well, this is not just odd in terms of numbers, this is conflicting information, and wanted to work out what was actually going on.
Senator, as we've said, our expectation was that we would be fully informed by Optus of any substantial changes to the information we had. We were not. We have taken that on board, that is something we need to improve in our processes, and we recognise the concern that you're expressing.
Who would be who in that if best case scenario had occurred and somebody had seen that information come in, whether it's you, Ms. Quinn, or Ms. Ransford, and said who would have been responsible for picking up the phone, calling Optus back and saying, I just want to check this. This is conflicting information.
I think it would have been, and this comes to some of the testimony this morning about escalation processes. I think in the first instance, we would probably have gone back to the person who told us the original information. The question then becomes...
No, I'm asking who in ACMA would have been responsible for doing that.
Would have been a member of my
team.
Ms. Quinn's team.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. But where that escalates within Optus and where that escalates within us, I think is also something we needed to look at.
Yes. Okay. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms O'Loughlin, did you hear the evidence given by Optus executives this morning?
Yes, we did, Senator.
And what's your response to that evidence?
Senator, as I said, I think we are in the middle of an investigation against a number of regulatory instruments. We would like time to... We have issued what's called Section 521 notices on Optus for a range of information to inform that investigation. That information has come to us. I think Optus's submission this morning will also be useful for us to review in terms of our investigation, as will their testimony this morning.
Well, we now have a Senate inquiry underway on
Absolutely.
This catastrophic outage. So could we please on notice have a copy of the notices, that information you've received from Optus, please?
Senator, I'm happy to take that on notice and consider that. I'm not quite sure I think we've got all the information, but leave that with me.
Yes, so and any other... we also please have a notice all other correspondence, messages, briefing notes in relation to the outage between ACMA and Optus?
Certainly, and I think
some of that we've already asked for.
I think we've taken that on notice previously, Senator.
I'm just concerned because you may have an investigation on foot, and there's a lot to absorb from the submission this morning. But what, if any, red flags were raised in the evidence given by Optus this morning?
Senator, I think from my point of view, the acknowledgement by Optus, and I haven't read their submission fully, that there were 10 big errors. And I think that's what we will look at. What were those mistakes that were made? And whether or not those are matters that are covered by regulatory regimes, but things like testing in advance. And when they knew, and I think that you raised this, when they knew that something had gone wrong, and then their actions after that. So I think all of those will inform. Our investigation are very much based on the regulatory instruments and holding them to account for compliance with those. But obviously there are other broader matters which will come to this committee as well. But I think the errors that Optus have already preemptively identified and what's identified through their submission in terms of their process and system failures.
Well, Optus has given evidence it did not test 000 calls during the upgrade. Does that concern you?
I found that surprising.
Do you know what else I find surprising, Ms O'Loughlin? That the changes in the rules to improve the 000 service, which required carriers to test for 000 calls during an upgrade, they were not implemented until the 1st of November. They were made in April but not implemented until November. I would put to you that that's a very significant failure by you as a regulator.
Senator, and as we've discussed in Senate estimates, that was part of a direction from the Minister to us, and we comply with that direction.
But surely you take no responsibility for that? You did all the... You take nothing? So it's all the Minister's fault, is it?
No, I didn't say that, Senator. What we did do was to work with the sector to try and encourage them to have those in place before the 1st of November, particularly in terms of the information to be provided to emergency service organisations, given the importance of getting that information to them so quickly. We had assurances by at least Telstra and TPG that they would put those in place voluntarily. And we've also recently written to each of the MNOs to make sure that they are absolutely compliant by 1st of November.
Ms O'Loughlin, you're the regulator. You're not a volunteer organisation. You made the decision to sit on your hands, I would put to you respectfully.
Senator, we didn't sit on our hands.
Hang on,
let
me just finish my question, Ms O'Loughlin.
Yes,
for
certainly.
6 months. There was no reason why you couldn't have embedded those new rules, new and improved rules, with much more urgency.
Senator, I think what was in the mind of the department in looking at those timeframes was the ability for the telcos to be prepared to implement those issues, given the substantial changes that were needed to their networks.
Well,
you may criticise that, but that was the thinking behind it.
Well, I would put to you that you've just not been tough enough. You haven't put the fire to the feet of the telecommunications carriers. There was no reason why that very basic obligation could not have been implemented straight away as a result of the Bean Review recommendations, which of course were made 2 years ago. I'm not just talking 6 months. These recommendations were made 2 years ago. And this and other recommendations, including submitting a management plan to the regulator, including ensuring that emergency services were notified of outages in real time. Now, in this case, we learned Optus didn't even know about it.
Senator, those obligations are now in place and we will hold the industry to account.
They were in place as of 2 days ago. And
That's
I would put to you, Ms O'Loughlin, that is just not good enough.
Well, Senator, that's your view.
Can I ask whether you agree with the Optus submission that the outage triggered a significant network outage under the standard?
Maybe I'll take that. Certainly there's no doubt in my mind that the definition of a significant network outage should encompass any case where 000 call has not been able to be successfully carried through to the emergency call person. So I don't think that's in question, Senator.
Okay, but isn't it the case that under the new determination, the new rules, the significant network outage category no longer exists?
That's right. The effect of the changes that were made in response to Bean was to move to the framework that is currently in place, which turns on either a major outage or a significant local outage.
So under the new rules that applied from the 1st of November, the new definitions of either a major outage or a significant local outage, would this particular 000 outage have reached the threshold for notification?
That's a matter that we're looking into as part of our investigation, Senator.
Well, Ms Rainsford and Ms O'Loughlin, I would put to you that it doesn't reach that threshold. And so what the Minister has done is change the rules in a way that means that there's now a higher threshold which does not capture an outage like what occurred on the 18th of September. Isn't that the case?
Well, I think, Senator, that's going to turn on the facts of this particular case, and that is something we're looking into as part of our investigation.
I'm asking for an answer now, please.
Senator, we can't give you an answer now. That's part of our investigation.
Well, I think you can, Ms O'Loughlin, because in my research and industry submissions at the time when you were looking at making these rules, and Ms O'Loughlin, you are under oath, and I would ask that you do provide us with information to the extent that you can, that you know. Industry submissions suggest thresholds such as 10,000 services need to be affected for there to be a significant local outage. Now, we know there weren't 10,000 services affected. So can I put it to you that the change in the rules have been a very major step back in that they no longer require carriers to notify ACMA of an outage such as occurred on the 18th of September?
Go on. Yep. So, Senator, that's not quite accurate in terms of how the definitions of major or significant local outage are framed. There are a number of conditions that need to be met, and in terms of major outage, for example, it is that the impact on carriage services affects over 100,000 services in operation. Now, whether each of those had a particular impact in terms of 000 is not a specified piece, or that it affected all carriage services in a state or territory in Australia, which is where the question to our mind comes around how this particular outage manifested in Optus's network and system and how that relates to that particular definition.
So I think you've mischaracterised the question. I was just simply saying that industry submission suggested that thresholds such as 10,000 services affected related to a significant local outage, not a major outage. We've got all these definitions. So I want to cut to the chase here. And I want to put to you very clearly that the changes in the rules that apply from the 1st of November arguably would not capture a 000 service failure like what occurred on the 18th of September. Isn't that the case, Ms O'Loughlin?
Senator, I don't believe I can give you an answer at the table, and I'm not trying to be obtuse. We need to look at the information.
That's a big issue for me, Ms O'Loughlin, because we are looking as a committee at what this parliament might need to do to improve the law, improve regulations,
Senator,
to make sure this never happens again.
Yeah, we're very happy to look at that issue for you.
Well, I'm sure you're very cognisant of this issue.
Yes.
Because what seems to have happened is that the threshold has now been raised so much higher that a limited outage which affects only 000 calls and not all calls would not be captured by the notification requirements under your regulations. Now, you are the regulator.
Senator,
so doesn't that concern you that maybe you have presided over changes in the rules which mean that carriers have less obligations to notify you and the department and emergency services?
Senator, and we would need to look at the detail of that with the different parameters that Ms Rainsford has pointed out, and I'm happy to take that on notice.
Chair, I don't think that's good enough, because this happened on the 18th of September. It's now the 3rd of November.
And it's not as if this issue hasn't been front and centre of your mind, obviously.
Because what we are saying, Australians need to know this won't happen again. We know the first call failed 1 minute after the outage began. The outage started at, the upgrade.
Yep.
The upgrade started at 17 minutes past midnight on the 18th of September. The first unsuccessful 000 call happened 1 minute later. Now, if the carriers have all their ducks in a row, then, you would have potentially been notified straight away. But if the rules have been changed such that you're no longer required to be notified because the threshold has changed,
Senator, I don't think
that is a massive issue.
And I don't think that is the case. But we would like to take that on notice so that we can give you the most thorough information.
Well, I would
say
to you that I do think
in terms of the notification on the time, there is a question here, and this is part of the investigation, as to why Optus did not know until 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 18th of September that this had taken place. That was the earliest notification we got.
Well, they knew just before that, but I agree, and we are very, very concerned.
Absolutely, and I think
that the
our
first failed 000 call happened at 18 minutes past midnight.
Exactly.
And it is astounding that Optus did not know until the South Australian Ambulance Service rang them in the afternoon.
And that those notifications were not escalated to a point where they understood that they had a problem.
But here I go back to this issue.
And this is what we need to
The Bean Review recommended that whenever there is a system upgrade, that carriers must test to make sure 000 works. Those regulations under your watch, made by the Minister, did not come into effect until the 1st of November.
But I would actually say...
I think that's a shocking failure, Ms O'Loughlin.
I would also say that I find it surprising that best practice would be always to test before you do an upgrade.
Now, hang on a minute. The Bean Review recognised that this was a hole in the regulations.
Those determinations have been put in
Don't talk
place,
to me about
Senator.
best practice, Ms O'Loughlin. When
Senator, we've put in place those determinations. We will hold the industry to account.
Well, you put in place the determination in April. Yes, you did.
Yes.
But you did not ensure that they came into effect until the 1st of November. I would put to you that you were too soft. You're not tough enough. But we look forward to your further answers to questions on notice. I am over time, and we will obviously have more questions going forward.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Senator.
Chair.
Thank you. Ms O'Loughlin, you said that you've understood that there was failings within your own organisation to escalate the concerns, to do the proactive investigation, to be an active regulator, I would put to you. Where does that fit in the review you're running? Because I struggle to see that the ACMA should be investigating itself. I mean,
Senator, we're not, as I said at the outset, our job and our responsibility is to investigate against the law, which is what we will investigate Optus about. Separately, we have turned our mind to our own internal processes, and I'm happy to provide information to this inquiry about how we will improve those processes. But, you will be looking at things which are beyond our investigative powers to consider, and that may be something that you turn your mind to. We can provide you with information about how we're improving our processes.
Well, could I ask you what you've done so far to ensure that you don't wait for the company to update you,
so we're
and wait for the company to get back to you, but you do your job as a watchdog?
So
what have you put in place?
So we have changed our standard operating procedures around these processes. The other thing that I did mention...
Could you give us that information on notice, please, what that means?
I think we've already taken it on notice, Senator, but we'll certainly do so. The other thing that I did raise at estimates, which we are turning our mind to with the department as well, is just the handling of the amount of information that we're getting from the telcos at the moment. So with the changes around particularly significant local outages and the major outages and the notification provisions under there, we are getting, as the department is, a large amount of information on a daily basis. Now, some of those may be very small outages in local areas that don't come to any effect on people, but there's a lot of information and data, and particularly, as Ms Rainsford said, where we might be getting multiple emails about this has happened, then we've found out something else has happened and this is the resolution. We need to look internally about how we manage that data more effectively. And that is something we're talking to the department about, how we can manage it better so that those red flags appear more quickly to us rather than us trawling through multiple emails every day. That's something that's a work in progress.
We're going to have a lot more questions for you as we go through and down the line. I've got one final one though, and that is, given what you do know, and I'm so alarmed that Optus did not think that correcting the information and informing you that it was 600 calls or 100 calls plus people that had died for almost 24 hours.
Exactly.
I'm alarmed that that is their attitude to you as the regulator. My question to you is, how on earth could you simply extend the Optus licence given how badly and how at the lack of good faith they have treated you as a regulator. And surely there needs to be, you can't just roll over their licence, as you said, as you informed us in Senate estimates that you would do. Surely there needs to be a re-look at what those conditions are and have they actually met them.
Senator, Chair, as we had mentioned at estimates, these are two very different processes. You're talking about their spectrum licences?
Yes, I am.
As part of the expiring spectrum licence process. We've given preliminary views that we think those for, amongst other things, continuity of service for more than 30 million people who have mobile phones, those licences should be extended and that a fair price should be made for the spectrum. That is quite different to the licence conditions that apply to Optus in terms of their performance. So I don't have much more to add to that. We're looking at the ESL process. Our final views will be made public in December this year.
Senator Gosh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the indulgence. The 000 custodian legislation that's just gone through gives you the power to make emergency call service directions either on your own initiative or on the request of the custodian. Do those powers have any bearing on this type of situation we've just seen? Could they be used to bolster the telecommunications company's requirements regarding outages and testing? And in addition, what do you see as the major use of that power in a context like this?
I think, Senator, from my point of view, I think what the custodian role does is give a much sort of more oversight of the entire system than is possible for the regulator to have, so that it may be able to anticipate areas where, for example, it requires greater information from the telcos about their preparedness of things. It requires greater information from telcos around things like the performance of devices on those networks. So I think the custodian can play a role in being preemptive at looking at the entire system and seeing where changes may need to be made or improvements need to be put in place. But I'll also ask my colleagues to comment on anything beyond that.
Probably just to add, one of the provisions in the bill that passed last week and is now operative provides for directions to be given to telcos to do a range of things as distinct from, so our existing powers were predominantly framed around the provision of information or documents to us. So, for example, it allows a direction to them to require them to take specified action for the purpose of developing policies, procedures and processes on an ECS matter. So I think that is an additional power, particularly focused on the 000 ecosystem that didn't previously exist, and that is a power that rests both with us as the regulator and with the 000 custodian.
So you see these powers as prophylactic?
Yep. And we welcome the role of the custodian. We think it's an important improvement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms O'Loughlin, as I said from the outset, we'll probably require you back as we go through, and we would endeavour to get as much information as we can from you proactively as we go through our process as well. You're doing your investigation. If there's things that you think help answer our questions that we've asked today, we'd appreciate you being forthcoming with that.
Happy to do so, Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our hearing for today. Thank you to all the witnesses, to our Secretariat staff. Thank you for helping us through this, and Hansard and Broadcasting.
Thank you, Chair.
Hearing closed.